total, ja.
Test. Test. Test.
Good evening, everyone. We're going to open the meeting. First thing before we start, Mr. Eagle, can you make a comment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
I am going to recuse myself from this meeting tonight. I am in a butter across Route 9, and even though I think I could act and measure this fairly, I think it won't. There would be a perceived unfairness involved. So I'm going to recuse myself and step down for tonight's meeting.
Do the sign thing. David, have you sit, please? Did you make the sign up? Yeah. You got the sign, David? Move it, tape it in front of where you sit. David is one of our alternates. Okay, before we start the meeting, one of the issues that we have is, in case there's any kind of an emergency or anything, there are 2 exits in the front of the room, but you go downstairs and out to the back, and the back exit, you go downstairs and go out, and you're supposed to go to the back of the parking lot, and everyone meets there in case something happens, okay? We're going to open the public hearing for the marijuana, and I am going to have Karen read the public hearing request.
Notice of public hearing, Comcan Inc., 730 Main Street, Millis, Mass. The Board of Appeals of the Town of Southborough will hold a public hearing in the Thomas J. McAuliffe Hearing Room of the Southborough Townhouse, 17 Common Street, on Wednesday, March 23rd, 2016, at 7:30 p.m. with regard to the petition of Comcan Inc., 730 Main Street, Millis, Mass. Comcan is seeking a special permit to allow a registered marijuana dispensary, RMD, within the existing building at 255 Turnpike Road, pursuant to Section 174-8.5. A copy of the application may be reviewed at the office of the Building Department at the Townhouse during normal business hours. Leo F. Bartolini, Jr., Chairman.
We have 2 letters also that we've received. Karen, would you read those into the record, please?
Yes. The first letter is from David McKay, Chair of the Economic Development Committee, dated March
Excuse
20.
me 1 minute before you start. We received this letter at 4:30 this afternoon. That's why nobody's been given it until just now.
So it's dated March 23rd, 2016. Dear Selectmen and members of the Planning Board, Zoning Board of Appeals, and Board of Health, the Economic Development Committee has observed with interest the recent debate in our town with respect to the marijuana dispensary proposed at 225 Turnpike Road and the proposed marijuana bylaw revisions. We take this opportunity to share with you our concerns and opposition to this project in particular, and our support for the proposed bylaw revision in the town meeting warrant article. At the public meeting on March 23, 2016, the EDC discussed these issues at length and voted unanimously to oppose the issuance of a special permit for a marijuana dispensary at 255 Turnpike Road. The EDC voted 5-1 to support warrant articles 37, 38, and 39 to amend the marijuana dispensary bylaw, Section 174-9J. The mission with the EDC is to grow the commercial and industrial tax base to stabilize residential taxes while preserving the character and charm of Southborough. While economic development and the growth of the commercial and industrial base is the hallmark of economic development organizations, generally, the EDC takes the last phase in its mission statement just as seriously, preserving Southborough's character and charm. Not every business venture that supplements our commercial tax base is appropriate for Southborough at every location. The residents of Southborough choose to live here because of the unique family-oriented character of our town that distinguishes it from many of the larger communities in our region. Our thriving business community with an emphasis on technology, healthcare, and nonprofit education, along with hundreds of small family companies and DBAs, support and enhance Southborough's local economy and its unique community and character. It is critical to our long-term success that we retain and attract businesses that are in keeping with Southborough's character and charm. It is for this reason that the EDC opposes the proposed marijuana dispensary at 255 Turnpike Road. It is not for the EDC to question the wisdom of the voters who approved the medical marijuana referendum. The Commonwealth's regulations, however, recognize that marijuana dispensaries must be appropriately located and sited to avoid damaging consequences to a community. Even the Commonwealth's baseline regulations restrict, for example, how close a dispensary can be to a school. These considerations are among those that cause the EDC to oppose this particular project at the proposed location. Other locations within the permissible area for a marijuana dispensary under the existing zoning bylaw or the proposed bylaw revisions would be far more appropriate for this use. First, the proposed 225 Turnpike Road site directly abuts residential homes on Clifford Street. Regardless of one's personal opinion for or against marijuana dispensaries, one cannot dispute the underlying controversy and the stigma associated with such a facility in the eyes of some of the members of the public. The residents of Clifford Street and the surrounding neighborhood cannot fairly be asked to endure the burden, detriment, offense, and devaluation of their property that would ensue, in our view, from being forced to host marijuana dispensaries so close to their home and neighborhood. These facts require a denial of any requested special permit for the project under the special permit standards set forth in Section 174-9 of the zoning bylaw. Second, the 255 Turnpike Road site proposal is close to the Neary and Trotter schools. Federal law provides for enhanced criminal penalties for illegal drug activity within 1,000 feet of a school zone. In our view, sitting a marijuana dispensary 630 feet from 2 elementary schools is substantially detrimental and offensive to our students, residents, and reflects poorly on the values of Southborough represents as a town that prioritizes community, education, and family. Finally, and of critical concern of the EDC, sitting a dispensary at 255 Turnpike Road in the heart of the office and business corridor, in our view, undermines our efforts to attract and retain the technology, healthcare, and professional services businesses that are, the backbone of Southborough's thriving commercial sector. Whether we choose to admit it or not, some companies will be reluctant to locate in the vicinity of the marijuana dispensary, resulting in increased commercial vacancies, declining commercial and residential real estate values, and generally undermining the economic vitality of our primary commercial thoroughfare. For the same reasons, the EDC also encourages you to support the marijuana bylaw amendments on the spring town meeting warrant. Thank you for your consideration, and please do not hesitate to contact me if I can provide further information or input. Very truly yours, David McKay, Chair, Economic Development Committee.
Karen, we have one more letter to read. And to just read the, right. Yes.
This letter is dated March 18th, and it's to the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Board of Selectmen, the Town Manager, and the Planning Board. This letter is to inform the town that Fundamentals Recreation Program in Southborough opened on February 4th, 2016. This recreation program is located at 26 Clifford Road, Clifford Street, Southborough, Mass. We are obligated to advise town committee members that special permit applications submitted by ComCan at 255 Turnpike Road, Southborough, Mass. For an MMD would be in violation of Southborough zoning 174.9 special permit regulation document, Section J. Medical marijuana, parentheses, 2, parentheses, 3, parentheses, states that a registered marijuana dispensary shall only be located not less than 500 feet from a recreation facility, as defined in parentheses C, end of parentheses. For purposes of this Section 174-9J, the following terms shall have the meaning ascribed. Recreational facility, a park, playground, forest reserve, conservation area, running trail or a track, hiking trail, beach, wading pool, soccer field, baseball field, football field, basketball court, hockey rink, dance or gymnastic studio, whether publicly or privately owned, to which the public has a right of access as an invitee. Sincerely, Erin Wheatley, Paul Murphy, 22 Clifford Street, Marnie Houlihan, Kevin Houlihan, 26 Clifford Street as well.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. One thing before we get going here, I'd like to introduce Mr. Cipriano, which is town council for us, which is sitting with us. Also, we'd like to start and ask the applicant to start making the presentation and introduce people that you have with you, and you can come up and sit at this table and also at the mic, sir. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You just make sure, those mics are on, ma'am? Okay.
Hello? Yep. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Cipriano, Mark Rosenfeld, CEO of Comcan, the applicant. To my left is Valeria Romano, our counsel, and at the podium is Dan Merrican, our engineer, who will be leading the presentation.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Comcan Inc. has submitted an application for a special permit for a medical marijuana dispensary at 255 Turnpike Road. I think you're probably familiar with the property. We submitted photographs. It's an existing two-story commercial building, currently occupied by a contractor. The applicant intends to take the first floor and one of the garage bays of that building and renovate it for the purpose of installing the dispensary facility. As a general statement, the site is not really going to change in any appreciable way. It has an existing driveway, parking facilities, utility systems, drainage facilities. There will be interior renovations in the building. There will be some exterior renovations, but as a whole, the site exists today as it will after this facility goes in, if a permit is issued for it.
Excuse me, sir, can you bring that mic a little closer to you, please?
Absolutely. With respect to, let me first go through the use, how it will operate. We'll talk a little bit about the requirements of the bylaw, and then we can answer any questions that you might have. The site is located on Route 9, as is required by the bylaw, in the Highway Business District. It is going to include, it's going to contain a dispensary, which is basically a place where medical marijuana can be purchased or picked up by people who are licensed by the Commonwealth to purchase these products. In order to be eligible for medical marijuana, you have to get a referral from a doctor, and you have to obtain a medical marijuana card from the Department of Public Health. If you get that card, you can go to a dispensary like this and you can obtain medical marijuana products. Those products include marijuana in its natural form, a plant, a leaf, a bud. It also can include extracts like oils. It can also include infused edible products, all of which are designed and intended to help patients address symptoms they have from various diseases and problems that they may have. If you have such a card, what you would do is you would come to the facility, you would park, you would go to the front door, you would have to show identification before you could enter the building. There is a security officer in the building at all times. It's operational. The officer would check your ID and then let you into a vestibule area, which is a secured vestibule. At that point, the security officer would check your ID again and check your medical marijuana card and would online verify with the Department of Public Health that you are who you say you are. The facility cannot operate if they don't have an active internet connection to the Department of Public Health and if they are unable to verify those facts on the spot. Once your identity is confirmed, you're allowed into the building. The building will be parsed into different areas. There'll be an area up front where they will have basically customer service areas where you can look at the products. You can consult with members of the staff about which products may be best for you, and then you can ultimately make your purchase. Once you've made your purchase, you leave the facility, you get in your car, and you go home. The security officer will ensure that there is no loitering on the property. There is no use of the products on the property. That is not permitted. There will be cameras outside of the building. There will be cameras inside of the building. It will be a well-run, well-secured facility. In reality, it's not a very complex operation. It may seem more complex than it is on the surface, but it's really nothing more than a glorified pharmacy like you might find at a CVS, except that this deals exclusively with medical marijuana products, whereas a CVS deals with much more powerful and potent chemicals and drugs and substances that people can obtain legally through their doctors. With respect to the various requirements of the bylaw, your bylaw 174-9J outlines a series of requirements, as does 174-9A. The site here is properly located in accordance with your bylaw. We are situated in the proper district on Route 9. We are located more than 500 feet from a school, from a daycare, and from a recreational facility. With respect to the schools in the area, there are two schools. They are situated on one property, the Neary School and the Trotter School. The properties are 640 feet apart, approximately. The actual school buildings are much further. This building is 1,250 feet from the Neary School, and it is over 2,800 feet from the Trotter School. So while the properties are at 640, the actual separation between the structures is substantially more. The applicant is in the process of obtaining Mass Department of Public Health approval. It's a multi-stage process. They are well in process now and are working towards the final steps on that. The dispensing activity will occur fully inside of the building. There will be no activity outside of the building except for patients coming and going to the building. The use that's proposed is, we would submit, in harmony with the purpose and intent of the bylaw. Town of Southborough has a medical marijuana bylaw. There obviously was an intent to allow these types of uses. This is a use that the voters saw fit to allow in the Commonwealth. It's a use that many people agree is very beneficial to many people who suffer from maladies that this provides relief from. It is an conspicuous use. It is an innocuous use. It is merely patients coming and going and picking up the products that they would like to purchase. The use will occur during normal operating hours, during daytime hours, sometime within 8 to 8. We haven't really established operating hours officially yet, but 8 to 8, 7 days a week would be the most it would be open. There would be consultation services, as I mentioned, in the facility. Anyone who has questions about the products or how to use them would be able to get some advice and recommendation. The last thing that I would like to speak about is the letter that you received, the second letter, about the purported recreational use at number 26 Clifford Road. Mark, if you could hand out those photos, please. It's come to our attention that the owners of 22 and 26 Clifford Road, which are behind the property, have supposedly started a business, a youth recreational business, a basketball training facility for youth, going to be run by their children, supposedly. The kids are going to receive training from the Houlihan's children, as I understand it. One thing that I would point out is, although there are residential uses behind this site, they're really isolated from the site. If you're familiar at all with the property, it sits atop a hill. There's about 45 vertical feet from where our building sits to where these residential homes lie behind the property. That whole slope is wooded. If I go on that property anywhere within the paved portion of that property, I cannot see any residences behind the property, which means they can't see me standing there. I'm sure if I walked back into the woods to the very back edge of their property, I might be able to see down the hill. But, you know, as a rule, from a topographical standpoint, there really is a lot of separation between this commercial activity and those residential activities. This business that is, again, as I say, supposedly started, is basically nothing more than a residential home with a driveway. You have a photograph in front of you of the property in question. Your bylaw requires setbacks from recreational uses, one of which is a basketball court. What you have before you is not a basketball court. It doesn't even have a painted key. It's not of adequate size. It is a parking lot for the residents at 26 Clifford Road. As a matter of fact, we have a photograph, which I can provide to you, of a vehicle parked in the supposed basketball court. From the standpoint of the business operation, while they claim to be open, this is a commercial use located in a residential zone. It's not allowed by right in the Residence A zone. At the best, it would require a special permit from this board, which, as far as we know, they have not asked for or obtained. As a commercial use, it's our understanding it would also require site plan approval, proper parking facilities, and other issues. It is also youth activities such as this. They're basically classified as youth camps by the Commonwealth. They are regulated by the Commonwealth under 105 CMR 430. They are required to get a permit from the Board of Health to open a camp of this nature. They are required to meet certain requirements regarding staffing. They have to have certain facilities, proper facilities to assure the safe well-being of the children that may or may not be on the property. And to the best of our knowledge, they have none of these things. So the reality is that you have a single-family residential home with a driveway with a basketball net on it. If they are in fact running a business, they're doing so illegally without the proper permits, and it just would not qualify as a recreational activity under 9J of your bylaw. With that, I can answer any other specific questions you might have about the site or the use. Just wanted to give you an overview, and we can certainly delve into any detail on any topics that you might have a question about.
All right, seeing that the fact that you did bring up the application that we have in front of us, I'd like to have town council make a motion on this application that was given to us here on the basketball for us, to explain what, they've already, what his statement was and where it should be at.
The only thing I was furnished was something known as a Chapter 110 business.
Michael, sir, you need to push your button.
Yep, there we
Thank
go.
you.
The only thing I was furnished was a copy of the Chapter 110, Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 110 Business Certificate, which was filed after the application had been received. I must tell you that a Chapter 110 certificate has no standing or status under zoning. That certificate is really a consumer notification to creditors as to a business address and an entity that may be located at a certain place, whether it's in a business zone or an industrial zone. The comments that are made tonight really go to the issue of whether or not this suggested use in a residential neighborhood is in fact a commercial use and not qualified to be done at that property. Under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 40A, the enforcement officer or the zoning police officer for the town is the building commissioner. So I think the commissioner is here, and I think that you have to at least defer to him for his interpretation as to the status of this use at that residence.
Thank you. Can we have one of those mics, please? You can pull it out of the stand. Mr. Mark Robidoux, the town building
evening, how are
inspector
you?
and zoning officer.
So I've had a chance to look at this real briefly, and it looks like under 174-8.2, Section B, it would require a special permit from the ZBA. So they would actually have to come before you. I haven't seen an application as of yet. I know I just received this Friday, so they may be working on it. They're located in a Residence A zone, so it would require a special permit from your board.
In the fact of that, are there any other questions for the building inspector right now? This is something that we're not gonna, I don't feel that we need to entertain during this process, because it really doesn't have anything to do with us presently. Is that correct?
Well, it's not primary to unless the building commissioner agrees that it is a permitted use, right now, as a matter of right, then it's not germane to this proceeding. What this proceeding is about is the application before the Zoning Board of Appeals and its merits or lack of merits to be discussed, to get citizen input in favor or in opposition, so that you can make a informed decision as an administrative board solely on the application before you. Nothing else matters to this board in its quasi-adjudicatory capacity, not future potential for zoning changes or any other matter, except that may be addressed or brought up tonight, to help you weigh in on whether or not you think it's appropriate to grant this special permit.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Excuse me, until we get done with the applicant making his full presentation, and then the board will do their questions and stuff, then we'll give the public to ask questions and make things on it, okay? Yes.
That was my presentation in chief, Mr. Chairman. If you have any questions for us, we'd be happy to answer them on any particular aspects of the proposal.
All right. The board members now, if they want to ask questions, we'll start. Tom?
Mr. Rosenfeld, could you tell me a little bit about who CONCAM is and, you know, what your makeup is, what your background is in running these types of medical marijuana dispensaries?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, we're still on. Like I said, my name is Mark Rosenfeld. I'm the CEO of ComCan. Behind me, I failed to introduce my sister, Ellen Rosenfeld. She's president of the board of directors. I believe, I don't know if you have the information as to our board of directors and our executive management team. I'm happy to run through who those people are. In terms of prior experience operating medical marijuana dispensaries, we're not an outside group. We didn't come here from Denver. We didn't chase this from Washington State or Oregon or Alaska or DC. We're a family from Millis primarily. We are residential developers in this area for 60-plus years. I'm an attorney. My sister's an attorney. We're local folks, so I can't tell you that I have a chain of these somewhere, you know, in the greater Denver area. I can run through, if you're not familiar with our board, we have a PhD nurse scientist who runs a cancer care group at Dana-Farber. I have a former member of staff at Harvard Medical School. We have a Brown-educated MD as our chief medical officer. We've assembled a quality board of people that we've known throughout our lives to handle this. We have Valerio Romano, to our left, is the Chief Compliance Officer. He's been doing this for a long time with other applicants as well. He's actually part of our executive management team.
Are they involved in the actual operations?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So we're a nonprofit, right? We have to all applicants are incorporated as nonprofits. We're not a 50c3 tax-exempt nonprofit. We are a tax-paying nonprofit, for lack of a better word. So, as a nonprofit, we don't have shares to give to outside investors, and as a point, we're completely self-funded. So we have no outside investors. We have no outside advisors. We don't have what you'll see many times with applicants throughout the Commonwealth is that they've established management teams that extract a percentage of sales. We do not have that. So in terms of day-to-day operations, again, there's the executive management team that I head up. Valerio's there, Mr. Romano, sorry. There's Barbara Lawrence. There's Dr. Cohen. There's our head of cultivation, James Sipe, and then we have our board of directors that we are accountable to. We're, sort of employees at will of the board of directors.
One other follow-up question. Where does the host community agreement come into play in the overall process? How do we, because that's one of the benefits that you're proposing to the town as part of the package. And can you explain to me a little bit how that, I know that's not something that's something you're going to negotiate with the Board of Selectmen, but where does that come in the process of the permitting process?
So is that part of their special permit? Is it in their bylaw?
No.
Okay, so as part of as a condition of our, as you know, part of the process involved us appearing before the Board of Selectmen to obtain a letter of non-opposition. That letter of non-opposition is a required component of the third phase of the Department of Public Health's application process. You have your application of intent, that's phase one. You have your management and operations profile, that's phase two. And then you have your siting profile, that's phase three. Phase three is the first time the department hears from you in terms of where your physical locations are going to be. So in addition to everything else they ask for, they want a letter of support or non-opposition from the chief executive, Board of Selectmen in this case.
In lieu of this, so we know, the board members know that when the Board of Selectmen had their meeting and they discussed this, they made it very clear that it is up to them and not our board to be involved in this at all.
Yeah.
Yep.
I just want to see how, if we're going to grant you the permit, I want to get some comfort that we're actually going to get a host community agreement.
Yeah, absolutely. And Valeria can talk about it. I can tell you that we have a meeting on Monday morning at 8 a.m. to discuss it. And it was very clearly part of the the agreement with the letter.
To give you a little bit of comfort as well, having done this throughout many communities in the Commonwealth in the last few years, just to name a few that we have gotten through this point, Plymouth, we got a letter of support or non-opposition, no host community agreement. Dennis, we got the special permit, no host community agreement yet. They're all happening. They happen afterwards. Quincy, special permit, no host community agreement yet. Georgetown, special permit, no host community agreement yet. And there are more. These are just ones that I've done recently off the top of my head. So it just comes in a process. And in fact, it's sort of a protection for the town to do it at the appropriate time, if that helps. And if you want me to elaborate, I can, but.
Okay, we'll talk about it further. I'll cede my questioning to Andrew.
I have two questions. First,
Excuse me, would you put your mic on?
I said I have two questions. First, could you just give us the lay of the land in terms of on top of the town permitting, the state licensing? So, for example, if this permit is granted, does that mean that you open immediately, or you need to get other approvals? 'Cause my understanding was that the state was strictly regulating the number of these dispensaries.
Yeah,
Could you explain that?
absolutely. I'm going to defer to Valerio, but there's a parallel process with our local zoning and our Department of Public Health application process. So I'll let Valerio answer that question for you.
So, Mr. Dennington, as far as the number of these that the state was going to limit, that number expired at the end of 2013. So it was the requirement of the voters that by the end of 2013, the state issue a minimum of 1 per county and a maximum of 5 per county, with a total maximum of 35 for the Commonwealth. But that was only through 2013. Since then, in the Baker administration, when he reopened the process on June 29th of 2015, they've said very expressly that they will cite as many as the communities are throughout the Commonwealth are willing to have. They will put 2 across the street from each other. They're not engaging in that computus or that thought process. They're leaving it up to the host communities, so that there's no limit as far as from the state as to the ones that will be cited. As far as where ComCan is, they're quite far along. The first stage of the application process is the application of intent. They made it through that, and that's then they get invited back for the management and operations profile, where you give a summary of what your plans are, and you show the financial backing, and all your team gets background checked very, very thoroughly. They made it through that, and they've been invited to submit the siting profile. And in fact, they've done that, and they are waiting to get we have some responses to the state, and we're communicating with them, and then they'll get a provisional registration. That's not a final, so they can't even start growing yet. They have to complete an architectural and security review process with the Commonwealth. The state inspectors come out and multiple times, and there's a lot of give and take, back and forth. We'll also work very closely with the town and the chief of police and make sure that they're completely comfortable with all of our security plans, and any other boards in the town that want to have access we're an open book. It's all about transparency. You get all the way through that process, you get a final registration. At that point, you can begin growing. You have to do full policies and procedures and various manuals that the Department of Public Health will come in and spot check and make sure that you're following up on them. Again, open book for the town, 100%. And then finally, at the very end, and this is, we're some number of months down the road, you're finally finished cultivating, and then you'll be able to open. So we have a long way to go before that will happen.
But to directly answer your question, in the granting of your special permit in no way guarantees that we will be approved through the end of this process by the Department of Public Health. It no way guarantees that we will open, and we certainly won't open tomorrow. If everything goes, if we comply with everything and we're successful at the Department of Public Health, it's still a year plus away.
And the Department of Public Health is involved in the review of a lot of the nuts and bolts. They have to approve all the employees that may work here, all of the security plans, the architectural plans. They're heavily involved in the design and operation of the facility itself. And just to be clear, this is not cultivation, this is not growing. The applicant is going to build a cultivation facility in a different community. So this is just dispensing the products that they're going to grow and prepare in a different community.
And then second, this kind of, your last point goes into this, that two of the special permit requirements were that no applicant shall be convicted of certain criminal offenses, and second, that the applicant is consented in writing to a criminal background check. And here, if the applicant is a corporation, can you speak to how we determine that?
So they've had every member of the corporation, all the board of directors, the executive management team, the director of cultivation, the director of security, and they're self-funded. Otherwise, it would also be people providing the financing. But everybody has done that. They've all filled out and consented to background checks. The Department of Public Health has run the CORI, state background check. They also run a federal background check. They also do Facebook and LinkedIn and social media and Googling you. And then they also figure out if anybody in your board of directors, executive management team, or directors lived in another state in the last decades, and then they'll do a background check in that state also. It's pretty thorough process. Creative Services, Inc. is the company that does it for the Department of Public Health. They've been doing it for them for a couple of years. An example is to something they come up with. We had one director in one of my groups who got his college degree in 1952. He actually inadvertently wrote on his resume that he got it in 1954. They uncovered that, and I had to write a letter of an explanation to the Department of Public Health as to that discrepancy. You can imagine what my letter of explanation said, but I had to do that nonetheless. So they are incredibly, incredibly diligent, and every member of ComCan has gone through that process.
I said I had two questions, but I thought of one other question, so I'll keep it brief. But can you talk about what you're thinking about in terms of signs for the property?
There's one standing sign at the front of the property, which will be basically remodeled. The signage is basically just going to be the name of the entity, ComCan Inc., and they have a logo. I think Mark probably has something with a logo on it if you want to see it. But that's about it. It's just going to state the name of the entity, and there will be a wall sign, too, that would be added with the same sign. It would be the name of the corporation.
And Mr. Dennington, the logo cannot have any marijuana or medical symbols, absolutely nothing like that.
The state does not allow that.
It's just not even allowed under the regulations put forth by the Department of Public Health and the Public Health Council. Moreover, it can't be lit up at night. You know, you see these. Can't be neon. Yeah, it can't be neon. You see these Colorado, dispensaries with flashing pot signs and whatnot. It's exactly the opposite here. The only people that will know that that business is there are the ones that have been following this, and then the patients and their caregivers in the Commonwealth, 1% to 2% of the population. Other than that, the reason you're going to know something's going on there is because the facade is going to be meticulously maintained. It's going to, other than that, there's just no way to know, and that's as per the regulations.
I'm done.
Okay. One thing is, to make it notified that for the sign issue, if it gets to that state, that it goes in front of the planning board and goes in front of the building inspector and gets approved on the different regulations of the town of Southborough as a normal process would be done at that time.
And all signage will comply with the zoning bylaw.
That's right.
Of course, Mr. Chairman.
Andrew?
you've actually kind of stolen some of my thunder already. I was going to ask about the signs.
I apologize.
That's okay. Just slightly off, but I'm just curious, as far as experience you've had, it obviously maybe not so much with necessarily an RMD, but what is the company's experience when it comes to security and anything remotely similar to this?
What is Comcast?
Security, yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about?
I think it can best be answered, and I'll let Valerio handle it, but I think it's best be answered by what's required by the regulations promulgated by Department of Public Health, and that we not only have to comply with them, they're involved every step of the way through design and build and implementation. We're also subject to 2 site visits a month, one announced, one unannounced. We've also pledged to work with the police chief here throughout that entire process to the extent that he wants to be involved. But
And on top of that, thus far, with the 6 dispensaries that are operating in the Commonwealth, just to give you an idea, there has been not one incident. There hasn't been one theft, one car accident, nothing that has, and not one incident. And I learned that, thankfully, for the first 4, actually, from the Southborough police chief, because he went and did his homework, and found out for us. So we've been fortunate that way. Additionally, just further on the process, and I believe Dan spoke well about what a patient has to go in and out. But there's also a back of the house, right? So there's a limited access area in the back of the house that patients can't go. There's actually a vault room, and typically the way we've been doing it, and this will be up to the building inspector and the architects and engineers, but typically the way we've been doing it is concrete cinder blocks with rebar. And then inside the vault room, there's actually safes that are bolted to the ground, like giant, heavy safes that store, for just a quick, limited time, cash and product when it's not being dispensed. Additionally, it has to work like a jewelry store. If a patient wants to see a product, the person working behind the counter actually takes the product out, puts it down, shows it to the patient. And then if the patient wants to see a different product, they have to take that, put it back in, lock it up, open the next one, and take it out. The security regulations in this are just incredibly diligent and thoughtful. In fact, I think some members of the town here in Southborough at the hearing on the letter of support or non-opposition complained that there was too much security involved in this. So, the Department of Public Health becomes a very serious and good partner in doing this. So, and also, they're going to hire a security guard, unarmed, who's going to be there whenever they're open. So there'll be a security specialist. And I know that ComCam would eagerly listen to any recommendation the police chief here had for who should staff that position. So I feel like security it's over the top from any facility that I've worked in or any license that I've gotten.
So I'll just add one quick thing on top of that, because Valerio mentions the vault room and the safe. So we're not allowed to maintain more product at a dispensing location than is reasonably foreseen necessary. We don't want deliveries coming multiple times during the day, but deliveries come throughout the week at random intervals. It comes from, again, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and people go online and they look to see what's going on in other states. So they get the impression that when you walk into a dispensary here, you're going to be greeted by jars of cannabis and a vending machine and that kind of stuff, which is not accurate. Everything comes from the cultivation processing facility, prepackaged in a dispensable amount. So whether it's a gram or an eighth or an ounce or an edible, it's all prepackaged. It's all labeled and identified. It's all chemically broken. The breakdown is all on it. When a patient goes through the process of making the selection, and a label is printed out with that patient's information, it's affixed to the item. There's already an existing label on there that says where it came from, and there's a process by which perhaps you've heard, and it's called seed to sale. So every seed that is planted at the cultivation facility is accounted for with a radio frequency tag. As it grows, it is kept track of in our database. when there's a process of trimming, when those leaves are trimmed, and those leaves are put through an extraction machine to create the oils for tinctures and pills and salves and balms. We know what plant that actually came from. So right up through the dispensing, we can trace it back to the plant that it came from. And each product, each batch is independently lab tested.
And they will grow a variety of different strains that are designed to have different medicinal properties and, target certain specific ailments and conditions.
Sort of famously, Sanjay Gupta had a little girl in Colorado that he looked at named Charlotte, and there's a strain named after her, Charlotte's Web, and she was suffering from hundreds and hundreds of seizures, basically hundreds of seizures per week, and this high CBD strain with no psychoactive properties has basically eliminated her seizures. And I know that in Georgetown and where we're doing one, there's another little girl there who's desperately waiting on medicine. We're trying to open there. And so it's the same thing. There are people like that throughout the Commonwealth who are virtually catatonic, young children, because they're waiting on this medicine. And I mean, that's really what's at stake. So I hope that helps.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, it does, thank you. I'm all set.
A bunch of the questions have already been addressed or sort of addressed, but obviously you stated there's not going to be loitering allowed.
No, not at all.
So obviously not. I mean, that's probably not going to be encouraged. But then you're saying there is going to be so during the hours of operation, what were the hours? Or contemplated hours, or?
Yeah, so not more than 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., which is standard throughout the Commonwealth. We'll begin with more restricted hours. It's hard to start with a wider array of hours and then try to pull it back, because then you get patients that get used to coming at a certain time. So we started staggered start and close times throughout the week, because again, you have to remember this is people accessing medicine. So some can only come on the way to work, some on the way home, some can't come during a weekday at all, so they have to come on a weekend. Did I?
Yep, no, and then, so during that time, there will be a security guard?
Yeah, so the
officer?
security officer all the time. So the security officer will have a few things. He'll have a view of the parking area. He'll have a view of the approach. He will have access, or he or she, sorry, that was a terrible mistake. They will have access to all the cameras. So now it's important to know that in addition to every inch of the interior of this dispensary, save the restroom facilities, will be covered by a camera, right? And it has to be. The entirety of the exterior of this building will be covered as well, so cars coming and going. There are requirements from the Department of Public Health that speak to the location of shrubs, trees, and bushes within X number of feet of the facility, so no one could secret themselves there. The security officer has complete oversight of all of this. We have an open line, obviously, to the Southborough Police Department. He or she has the ability to go out if anybody is standing around for too long. It's important that this board knows, what's at stake for us as the applicant. The Department of Public Health is not going to tolerate any nonsense. So if there are complaints, we have our registration on the line. So that represents a significant investment, not only in money, but in time.
And then how much staff is there at any given time? Is it varied by hour, by busyness? Is there always one staff member, 3 staff members?
So again, this is also driven by patient numbers, right? Which is a tricky thing, because we don't know how many of these dispensaries will be operational throughout the Commonwealth, right? There's 180, give or take, pending applications. We don't know if all of them will open. We don't know if half of them will open. we don't know if there's another 20 in the queue to submit their applications tomorrow. This is a rolling process. That being said, there'll always be a security officer, there'll always be a few people, a few dispensing agents at the front, there'll always be back of house. I mean, I would imagine there's always 5 to 6 minimum, and then as necessary, staff up from there.
So then, what, I guess, what constitute loitering then? Do you have a protocol for that? I mean, at what point do you feel that we have an issue here and there's 17 cars in the parking lot?
A patient will pull into the parking lot under the watchful eye of the security officer. I mean, it's not a situation where it's, as soon as you pull in, if you don't jump out of your car, but you know it when you see it. What's loitering? You know it when you see it. So there's no reason for somebody to pull in the parking lot and spend any excessive amount of time before they access the facility. There's no reason for anybody to spend an excessive amount of time after they exit the facility on their way to the car or in their car before they leave. So again, they're under the eye of the security officer, and nobody be tolerated to sit around.
And I don't even know, does something like that get monitored at the town level? Police, is that something that, we as a town monitor for,
The parking?
well, just in general loitering? Is that something that is?
Honestly, I don't know what that would be. That would be something that probably would go in front of the building inspector, or town council can make a comment on that.
I understand that seems to be a general concern of folks, that this is gonna be a, hangout spot. So at what point do we,
Besides state regulation, your police department, our police department, I'm sure, would direct efforts to ensure that nothing was violated. Loitering, they're indicating to you that no loitering is going to occur. You can make that a condition of if you do grant the permit, a condition of the permit. The first individual who would be enforcing that would be the building inspector or zoning officer, but for whatever reason, he could call the police in on a regular basis if he chose, and ask them to enforce it.
So,
Okay.
Mr. Rapano, so we have nothing to gain by patients loitering in the parking lot.
I'm not implying
No,
you are, I'm
no, no, absolutely. But I'm trying to ease any concerns that the public might have. The first step in the process is that we know who everybody is that comes and goes. So if they present a problem, they won't be back to this dispensary. They'll be reported to the Department of Public Health. They'll have their registration card yanked by DPH. They won't access any dispensaries.
And as far as a condition of a special permit, but we would also work closely with the chief here. If there were some specific criteria that he wanted us to, make sure our patients adhered to, we would do that. And, part of the intake process is the patients will actually have, a form that they're going to read, and it's going to talk about security measures and storage and not operating vehicles and machinery while under the influence of cannabis of any sort. And we can also include in that, don't loiter in our parking lot. Here are the criteria that has been set out by the Southborough Police Chief, and stick to it. And they actually are going to have to sign off and acknowledge that they've read and been instructed on all the parts of that sheet. So we work closely with the chief on making sure that concern is allayed and operate like that as well.
So, final question, this is, I think you alluded to it earlier, things you've heard and read about, that this is largely a cash business, so this is not something that you're able to use credit card, you're not able to, is that, and I know I've heard that could create concerns or issues, that it's, folks coming with cash quite often and being there present with a lot of cash, that other things revolve around that. Is that the case with this? Or?
So as to the basis of the question, yes, it's entirely a cash business. To the follow-up part of that question, no, it's not an issue, and it doesn't play out as an issue. There's no data supporting the generalized fear that people lurk and wait and follow patients and, mug them in parking lots. It's just not borne out by the facts. And we have medical marijuana programs active in 36 give or take, states throughout the country. We're fully recreational in 4. California's been at it for 20
years.
some odd
20
years.
this year.
So it's absolutely a process of informing the public, which is, you know, a good bit of what tonight is about. But it's also incumbent on the public to go out and look. There is hard, actual, factual data out there as opposed to, you know, generalized misconceptions.
And so the conception that where that comes from largely is actually California, you know, 20 years ago. So what nice about Massachusetts, it's a vertically integrated model here, meaning that each dispensary or nonprofit, each RMD, actually has to do the cultivation, processing, and retail all within that company. You can divide that up in 2 locations, but you got to do it all within that company. So there's no buying pounds of marijuana from caregivers showing up in their backpacks and then walking out with $6,000 or something. There's none of that. It's completely not part of the program here. So there is that sort of idea, and that came from, you know, California, where dispensaries will pop up for $10,000, virtually no security. People will just grow marijuana in their basements and then walk in and sell it. And so in Oakland, in 1998, that was a concern. In the incredible regulated market that Massachusetts is, in the industry that Massachusetts is, it's just not the way it works here due to this vertical integration.
Any individual applicant is only allowed to have 1 cultivation facility and up to 3 dispensing facilities. That's the maximum that any individual applicant is permitted by DPH, if they successfully navigate the permitting process for all 4 of those locations.
I'm good.
I'm going to ask the question of what you just stated. You're only allowed to have 1 facility?
1 cultivation facility.
Dan, wait one
Right.
second.
So it's a vertically integrated model. You can each applicant can have up to 3 retail locations or dispensing locations. You can actually create 3 cultivation and processing facilities also. So you could have 1 cultivation and processing facility service 1 dispensing location, another one service another one, and another one service another one. That's what an applicant could do. The fact is, the cost of building out a cultivation and processing facility in New England is, with the security measures they need, with the HVAC that it takes, is just prohibitive. There are no companies, even the most affluent companies that brought in all the money from Colorado, are doing 1 cultivation facility, 1 cultivation and processing facility. So none of my clients are doing multiple. I haven't heard of any multiple existing. So technically, under the regs, each RMD registration allows you those 2, you know, 1 cultivation and processing, 1 retail, or you could do them all in the same building as well. There's plenty of co-located facilities. The Quincy one that we're opening, for instance, is cultivation, processing, and retail all in the same building. So technically you could do all 3, but practically speaking, no one does that, and ComCan isn't doing it. They're cultivating and processing in one area, and they'll be delivering it to their dispensing facilities.
Are there any other facilities that you have other than the one in the presentation here?
So we've submitted 3, we have 3 applications pending with the Department of Public Health. We have submitted 2 siting profiles. So I want to say we've completed the application process, but we've given 2 locations to DPH so far. So there's this location, and then there's a Millis location. We have not submitted our 3rd siting location to DPH yet.
Okay. The next step forward will be, I am going to open up to the town officials that would like to make any comments presently.
Should we move, Mr. Chairman?
No, for right now, you can stay. What we're gonna do is, first I'm gonna find out if there are any town officials that wanna make any comments, and apparently there's not. So what I'd like to do is, if you maybe be able to come over this way, and what we're going to do is, I'm going to ask the residents that are in favor of the application to make comments first. And in lieu of that, you have to get up at the microphone and say who you are and what your address is. So if there are any residents in favor of it, I'm going to ask them to come forward and make a comment.
Good evening, Desiree Asselbekian, 137 Woodland Road. I thank you, Mr. Bartolini, for allowing people on both sides of this issue to have a forum tonight to give their views. As many people know, I did speak in favor of a letter of non-opposition at the Board of Selectmen level, and I will continue to speak in favor of zoning this facility on Route 9 in Southborough through special permit through your board. At the Board of Selectmen's meeting, I concentrated mainly on the zoning, and the zoning bylaw that the town passed with 2/3 vote 2 years ago after a very rigorous process. The process took 2 town meetings. One was a special town meeting and one was an annual town meeting. And the first town meeting, it was very clear, as I'm sure you all remember, that the restrictiveness of the zone was not what people at town meeting wanted. The planning board came back at the next town meeting, expanded the zone, and again, it got that 2/3. We all know how difficult it is to get 2/3 on anything. So that definitely showed support. One of the reasons at town meeting I supported expanding the zone was because of the all-cash business. I didn't want a medical marijuana facility to be permitted in an area that was dimly lit, that police presence was not there. On a Route 9 location as proposed by ComCam, you have an optimal visual area, not only for patients to access, but also for there to be police presence, both local and state. Route 9's a state road. Also, and this is, I'm gonna make my final reason why I support this is a personal reason. As some of you know, my grandfather passed away 2 days ago of a stroke. In his last year of life, he had many medical complications, but in his last year of life, after working since he was 4 years old, both on a farm and as a machinist, he established and developed severe arthritis and degenerative discs. For approximately his last 6 to 9 months of life, he was debilitated, immobilized, and was in pain every single day of his life. Being that he was 81 years old, well, just turned 81, but 80 years old, he had somewhat of an old school view on marijuana. But it was just 1 week ago, after multiple conversations with both myself and my mother and my grandmother, that he came to me during lunch, finally agreeing to see a doctor and access medical cannabis because he was in that much pain. And I know that there's opponents to this for a lot of different reasons, and I respect your opinion. But who do you really think is going to access this facility? Who do you think is going to be hanging around? It's patients that are in pain, patients who are debilitated, patients that have cancer and that are seeking chemotherapy. And if they can have a Route 9 access, whether it's Southborough or Westborough or Ashland or Northborough or Framingham, and they can have access to medicine that could maybe just for a brief moment not have them living in pain every day, I think that that is worth this board's time to consider when you're considering granting this special application. Regardless of my personal situation, we have zoned this usage in this town. The state has voted for this usage. The townspeople have decided that this is where we all saw maps of where this could go. And I think it would be a real shame if this board didn't take into account a whole entire 2 town meetings of hundreds of people that voted on this. So while I may be the only one to stand in support tonight, I know that there's other people in this town that also stand in support. And I really sincerely hope that the zoning board does the right thing and grant them the special permit that they seek with obviously conditions that are best for our town and the people in this town. So I thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to request one question I want to ask the applicant, and I apologize because I forgot to do it the first time. And what Mrs. Astrobekian stated, if somebody needs to have the marijuana for mental health, will you people be delivering it also, other than making everybody come there to pick it up? Is that something that would be happening?
Yes, absolutely, and we've discussed that with the police chief here, and the police chief also concurred. I don't want to say the police chief expressed support one way or the other, but we discussed that succinctly with the police chief and directly, and the police chief is very well aware of our plans and didn't express any opposition to them whatsoever. It comes from the dispensary. And it won't be delivered from the retail location here in Southborough. It will be delivered from the cultivation and processing facility. So it's not like trucks will be coming back and forth to deliver to patients, but patients that have a debilitating condition, that can't access a dispensary, that are anywhere close to here, ComCan will satisfy that need and deliver to them.
Do you need our special permit to do that?
No. Well, we need our special permit to site here, absolutely we do.
I know, but you need the special permit for the dispensary.
Yeah.
That you're applying for. But to do the home delivery directly from the cultivation center, do you need a special permit for that? Because you're not citing
Do we need the special permit to do delivery from the cultivation center? Probably not, no. But in order to have complete patient access, we will need it. And this won't be our location, right? ComCan won't be in Southborough, and we won't be responsible for the patients around here without the special permit.
My point is,
siting
if
here.
we were to deny your special permit, you would still carry out that home delivery service.
Potentially not, potentially wouldn't be able to do it in Southborough. It's because that we have a retail location in Southborough that we would deliver to the circumference of Southborough, because this is where our patient base is.
You should mention home cultivation and what this entails.
Oh, yeah. So the reason that home delivery is critical, and this is why the police chief actually really liked, why the police chief expressed no opposition to home delivery, was because right now in Southborough, I can tell you almost with certainty that there's somebody growing marijuana in their basement or their closet pursuant to a hardship cultivation registration. And so that hardship cultivation, when you hear the word hardship, what you think of is financial hardship. But it also means lack of access hardship. And right now, the Department of Public Health is not keeping track of hardship cultivation registrations. There's no requirement that somebody growing tells the police chief or anybody in their local town. All they need is a medical use of marijuana card, which are difficult to get. You got to go through the department, you got to register, but you don't have to tell them that you're growing. So what having a dispensary in Southborough and having a company that commits, and you could make it part of a condition for the special permit to deliver in Southborough, ends that lack of access hardship cultivation. And so it ends that, and once we had that conversation with the chief absolutely expressed no opposition to delivery. The way deliveries work, you have 2 agents in the car at all times. You plan your route ahead of time. You have a GPS monitoring. You have a live conversation going to the point of origin. If you deviate from your route for any reason, you have to notify local law enforcement, which would be Southborough Police Chief, as well as the Department of Public Health within 24 hours. So there's a locked box in the delivery vehicle, steel bolted to the ground or welded, and there's slots in that the cash will get dropped in and cannabis will come and related products will come out of. So it's not like so the delivery is just as secure as the rest of the process. But Southborough wouldn't necessarily be operating ComCan wouldn't necessarily be operating in Southborough, and therefore wouldn't have that necessarily be able to commit to delivering around here, right? So if they wind up siting somewhere else, then they wind up siting somewhere else, and that's where they'd have to commit to delivering to.
Okay.
It's a function of manpower as much as anything else.
Okay. Any resident that would like to make speaking on the opposition of the application? Excuse me, sir. Yes, Paul? Yes, you may.
Paul Semino, Board of Selectmen. I wanted to sort of slot in between those in favor and those presumably opposed, because I'm not up here to speak in favor or in opposition, but I am here tonight, as I said I would be, to follow up on a promise that was made to me by Mr. Rosenfeld at the Selectmen's meeting where we considered the letter of approval or non-opposition. regarding the ability of ComCan to access and perhaps locate this facility at some other location in town. And he pledged to me that night, as I think many of you know, that he would continue to seek out alternatives to this particular address. I'd like to ask him to just take a couple minutes to update everybody on that particular topic before we jump in with the rest of the public.
Thank you, Mr. Semino. So, unfortunately, I didn't print out the list of properties that I have examined since that meeting. They've all been documented through email to Mr. Semino. I can tell you that I spent a great deal of time in this zone prior to locating 255 Turnpike Road. Became very familiar with your zoning bylaw, what was allowed, what was not. Had to have frontage on Route 9. That didn't necessarily mean that you had to see the building from Route 9. There's a couple of properties that actually have frontage, but they're accessed from a driveway off of another street. I spent time, I'm a member of Multiple Listing Service Property Information Network. I'm a member of LoopNet. I've been on, every listing site. I've been up and down the road prior to finding my current location. At that meeting, I pledged to continue to research other options. There's a few things to keep in mind when trying to site a dispensary. Aside from satisfying your requirements through your zoning bylaw and through your, overlay district, I need to find a property owner that would like a dispensary located in their property. This rules out most of the properties in your area just by virtue of the fact that there are many large office buildings. They're nationally owned, they have national mortgages, they can't do business with me. They also aren't interested in carving off a small portion of that to satisfy my need. Further, even if it wasn't a hot topic use, somewhat controversial use, I guess, they're not interested in having a retail component in their otherwise professional buildings. After that, you go up and down, you look at raw land, you look at what's out there. I explored the properties. I'm sorry, I think it's at the end of Middle Road. Is that? There's a couple of buildings that actually have frontage on Route 9. Those didn't work. One other thing I should mention is our Board of Selectmen meeting generated a fair bit of publicity in the local papers. I received 2 phone calls within a day or two of those meetings with, hey, maybe I have a location that works for you. One was in Framingham, so that didn't satisfy your zoning requirements. And one was one property outside, so it was Business Village. It was east, up towards the Walgreens area. I have spoken to property owners with raw land that just didn't work. If you go on MLS, you can see there are 2 commercial properties for either sale or lease in the town of Southborough right now. The newest one came on 134 days ago. Maybe the other one I think has been on for maybe 500 days. If you go on LoopNet, it's the same 5 properties that have been on since I started this process.
Mr. Semino probably knows too, but the process where he's saying on Middle Road, the building that they talked about, the frontage is not on Route 9. The Route 9 property is owned by the MWRA.
Strip.
Right, and it doesn't have frontage. The frontage is on Middle Road, which doesn't work under our bylaw.
Okay. And the properties are unavailable.
Right, and the one in Fayetteville, which is at Woodland Road, is in the Village District there also, which was the other site.
Yes, sir.
There were raw land parcels on Route 9 that didn't work?
Yeah, again, the problem is that I take up such a small footprint. So if I was perhaps positing a cultivation facility that maybe would take a 30,000 square foot of space. Maybe people would be more interested in
So when
doing
you say it
something.
didn't work, you mean economically it wouldn't work, it'd be cost prohibitive to buy an expensive piece of land to build your small footprint?
Yeah, sure. So there was a property that was engineered for a 30,000 square foot multi-story office building. And I'm not,
Engineer meaning permitted?
no, not permanent, but when some preliminary engineered, you know, this is
Maybe
what,
a site
this is what
plan
I think I
for-
got, I think I can fit this on it. You know what I mean? How much space would you need? And I say, 2,500 square feet. Click.
So I wanted to have the public have the benefit of that report. Mr. Rosenfeld, thank you for that. Obviously, as people come to the mic, if you have follow-ups to that, you should feel free. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Semino. All right, so the residents that would like to speak against the position and the application of this may come up and use that microphone, and like I had stated before, you have to state your name and your address, please, and go forward.
Good evening. My name is Julie Connolly. I am at 26 Oak Hill Road. I'm also the vice chair of the Economic Development Committee, whose letter you read into the record earlier. First, I just want to address Mr. Semino's comment, and I do appreciate, I was at the Board of Selectmen meeting, and I do appreciate the fact that he requested that, that the applicant continue to seek alternate sites. But I do want to just remind this board and everyone here that it's not really incumbent upon this board or the selectmen or anyone else to ensure that this particular applicant or any particular business find a home here. You know, we certainly can't zone them out, but we are not responsible to make sure that they find that if they can't use the space, that they have another space available. Also, I wanted to talk about the special use permit. My understanding is that the special use permit requires that, that you consider things like the health and the safety of the special use, the residents, the property value, and how it all fits into the community. And while we've spoken about that this is very new to Massachusetts, it's actually very new nationally to Colorado and to other states that have just in very recent months or years implemented medical marijuana in dispensaries. So unfortunately, we don't have a lot of data on the effects of it. And there have been some reports. I've done some research. Others here in the room I know have also done some research that have shown some correlations to increase in crime, to increase in driving under the influence in regions where dispensaries are located. There have been reports in Colorado, which is probably our best area of comparison. There have been reports of burglaries, robberies, and in dispensaries and in surrounding areas. So my point is that we know that there's been no incidents reported so far in any of the dispensaries in Massachusetts, but we've only had dispensaries in Massachusetts for about 8 months, and we only had one 8 months ago, and I think the other 3 have opened in the past 3 or 4 months. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I know they're all relatively new. So unfortunately, we just don't have hard data to compare. So my question is, do we really want to be the guinea pig here? Do we want to be the ones that say, okay, is there going to be an increase in crime? Is there going to be an increase in driving under the influence? And do we want to test that out 630 feet from our local schools?
Thank you. My name is Safdar Medina. I'm a resident at 19 Southwood Drive. Before I begin my presentation, I do have a lot of data to present that I'd like to share with everybody on the board when I hand out.
Thank you. Take that one.
So I'm a parent of a 5th grader and a 7th grader, a student at Neary and Trottier School, and my other hat is a general pediatrician in practice. I'm also on the District Attorney's Opioid Task Force. So I want to begin by reviewing the warrant article and talk about Chapter 174 of their zoning bylaw. And specifically, what it says is any business shall not be in conflict with public health, safety, convenience, and welfare, and shall not be substantially detrimental or offensive to the neighborhood or destructive of property values there within. And I do have data to show that opening up a medical marijuana dispensary will be in direct conflict. So we all know that marijuana is illegal at the federal level. It's a Schedule I drug, which is classified as being the most dangerous drug with a high risk for abuse. State and federal laws largely restrict banks and credit unions for providing financial services to marijuana-related businesses because it is a Schedule I drug, and registered marijuana dispensaries, as mentioned, must operate in cash only. Federal law also imposes a 1,000-feet school zone perimeter. All public and private elementary and secondary schools are protected by federal drug-free zone laws expressed in the Crime Control Act and the Controlled Substances Act. Federal drug-free zone laws stipulate a drug-free zone of 1,000 feet of a school, and within such zones, there is increased law enforcement activity and swifter prosecution with greater penalties for all drug-related offenses. So, to begin, some studies on the consequences on young children of having marijuana dispensaries. In Colorado, the combination of decriminalizing medical marijuana and declining federal prosecution was associated with a significant increase in the exposure of young children to marijuana. I cite a study in this handout of 1,378 cases between January 2005 and December 2011, comparing pediatric hospitalization rates before and after medical marijuana was legalized in Colorado in 2009. So before 2009, 0 of 790 were related to marijuana. After 2009, 14 of 588 hospital admissions were related to marijuana. 8 of those 14 cases involved medical marijuana, and 7 of these exposures were from food products. So the unintended outcome may suggest a role for public health intervention in this emerging industry, such as significant perimeters between congregating children with facilities selling medical marijuana, child-resistant containers, and warning labels for medical marijuana. The next study I want to quote is a very significant one, talking about the diversion of medical marijuana. This is from the Journal of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry from July 2012, where they interviewed children that were in an adolescent substance abuse treatment program in Denver. 121 of the 164 adolescents, almost 74%, reported using medical marijuana that had been recommended for someone else, a median of at least 50 times. And in the study, adolescents who used medical marijuana began using marijuana regularly at a younger age and showed more marijuana abuse and dependence and conduct disorder symptoms than adolescents who did not use medical marijuana. So the lead author on this study summarized that many high-risk adolescent patients in substance abuse treatment have used diverted medical marijuana on multiple occasions, which implies that substantial diversion is occurring from registered users. Our results support the need for policy changes that protect against diversion of medical marijuana to adolescents. So evidence suggests, despite efforts, medical marijuana is diverted. Keeping a safe distance from a school zone can impose hurdles to diversion. And I do have to say that in my own practice, this is something that I see. There are teenagers coming in who are openly telling me that they have received the marijuana that they are using from someone else who obtained a medical marijuana card and is selling it to them. Moving on to adults. So, an NIH study funded by the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine showed that hospitalizations with marijuana abuse or dependence codes increased from 17,469 in 2001 to 68,408 in 2012, almost a fourfold increase. And more than 85% of these marijuana hospitalizations were coded as abuse rather than dependence. The other bullet point from this was an additional 1 dispensary per square mile in a zip code was cross-sectionally associated with an almost 7% increase in the number of marijuana hospitalizations. And this is for adults. So, and once a dispensary is open, it's much harder to go back and create regulations to guide their location and density. Passage of laws permitting marijuana use and sale is likely to continue, so it is critical that we continue to research the impact of dispensaries on the health of local communities to provide guidance on regulations and public health outreach to prevent abuse. So, there's data to indicate this is detrimental to a community. We talked about this being a cash-only business. The federal government has now allowed banks directly to transact medical marijuana purchases, meaning business can, of course, only be conducted in cash. In 2009, the Denver Police Department estimated about 17% of marijuana shops had been robbed or burglarized, at a rate similar to liquor stores and banks and on par with pharmacies. However, in 2016, that picture changed. There have been about 317 burglaries and 7 robberies reported by marijuana companies in the last 2 years, according to police data. This shows an annual robbery and burglary rate of about 50%, more than double of what it was in 2009. So a cash business with illegal drug substances places potential to be substantially detrimental and offensive to the neighborhood or destructive property values therein. Again, right, quoting our bylaw. Safety. So, the National Traffic Safety Association said in a statement, drunk driving declines while drug use behind the wheel rises. Changes in state policy on marijuana use, including medical and recreational use, may have contributed to an increase in marijuana use by drivers. I'd like to add to that by also saying there's a perception among our youth that marijuana is safe. And the National Institute of Drug Abuse recently put out some data that said 1 in 3 college students had driven under the influence of marijuana within the past 3 months. So, and the drug with the largest increase in weekend nighttime prevalence overall is THC. 8.6% of weekend nighttime drivers tested positive for THC, and that increased to 12.6% in 2013 from 2007, which making it a 48% increase. The prevalence of illegal drug use increases from daytime to nighttime as well, which we all know, from about 10 to 12% to 13 to 16%. So driving under the influence of marijuana is increasing, and like it or not, people will take their marijuana probably before they leave the registered marijuana dispensary. Marijuana use is also correlated with increase in fatal car accidents. In June 2013, a Colorado car accident study published by Accident Analysis and Prevention revealed an increase in traffic fatalities involving drivers who tested positive for marijuana. Marijuana has effects on driving, we know that. Lane weaving, it decreases your mean speed, it increases mean variability in headways, it impairs cognitive function, and multiple other things. Your attention is divided, and lane position variability. So Lee concluded from the study that drivers involved in fatal motor vehicle accident crashes were almost twice as likely to be positive for marijuana than drivers not involved in fatal motor vehicle crashes. It's important to know that GPS navigation will take drivers to Deerfoot Road to reverse direction or via Middle Road and John Matthews to reverse direction on Route 9. It only takes one impaired driver navigating on country roads to cause an accident. So there's a map on this handout that you all can look at, and it shows the route that a driver might take as they leave the dispensary. And if they turn right on Deerfoot Road, there's a bus stop with congregating children, and there are several single-student bus stops. They can head towards up Deerfoot to Route 30, or they can turn right on Clifford, where they would encounter walkers, walking paths, and more bus stops. In addition, that route on Clifford Street is used as training for trottier, cross-country, and track practices, as well as St. Mark's athletics. So this would place an unnecessary risk on the neighborhood and cause potential irreversible harm. So just to summarize on the last slide, the use sought and characteristics of locating a medical marijuana facility at 225 Turnpike Road is in direct conflict with the zoning bylaws as written. As has been proven through research documented on the previous handouts, there is a high potential negative impact to the public health, to the safety, and to the welfare of the residents, and this will have a destructive impact on the neighborhood in the surrounding area. Thank you.
Before we go any further, I'd like to ask the applicant to make any kind of comment if he would like on this.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. And I do appreciate, the thoughtful handout that was produced. It is clearly very well-reasoned. Unfortunately, it's completely incorrect and one-sided at the same time. First of all, I'm not even sure why we're engaging in this discussion. Having done a whole bunch of special permit hearings around the Commonwealth thus far, we're back to whether medical marijuana should be legal in the Commonwealth. We're back to deciding whether there should be whether the zoning bylaw was passed by 2/3 vote in Southborough. I don't think we really should be engaging in this, and my preference, although I, of course defer to the chairman and the board, would be to limit the scope of this inquiry into whether this site plan and this special permit is appropriate. And just because they pull random words like safety out of the bylaw and all of a sudden say, oh no, reefer madness, that's actually not the case. And I'd really like to limit the inquiry, if possible, to what's germane in front of us. Do we have a zoned use? Are we proceeding with special permit appropriately? Does our use comply? Are we going to tear up the driveway? And do we have enough parking spaces? All the things that have to do with special permit, not this reefer madness inquiry. That being said, there's a whole bunch of things that go here. Health, right? So health is the hook that we're using to even get into this inquiry. And please cut me off if we can end this inquiry and we can save ourselves a couple hours. I'd be happy to do that. But health as the main reason that we're going to engage in this inquiry. This is a healthcare program. This was passed by 63% of Massachusetts residents to help sick people with debilitating medical conditions. Are we going to say this isn't a health care program? That's exactly what this is about. By doing this, the citizens of Southborough, who voted in 2/3 to locate dispensaries where they are here, voted above 60% to have medical marijuana in the Commonwealth, agreed with the rest of the voters of the Commonwealth. This is a health care program. This is going to help people. Now, it always takes, people who show up at these kinds of hearings are always the ones that are opposed to it, right? I mean, there's tons of people sitting at home who hope that it will go through, but they don't come and turn out in droves because of the reefer madness. People who show up to these things are always opposed to it, no matter what it is. It's a 40B development, no matter what it is, you get the same people showing up to these meetings opposed to it. And that's exactly what's happening here. So we know from the voting statistics in Southborough and throughout the Commonwealth that this is a positive, and people believe that. It's just that the few people who decide to show up don't. So we know this is a healthcare initiative. We know this helps people with debilitating medical conditions. We know this helps people with cancer. And cancer, HIV, glaucoma, Crohn's disease, multiple sclerosis. It's not only palliative for MS, for instance, it actually slows the progression of the disease. And when I hear an MD talk about this is Schedule I controlled substance, then he actually ignored the main definition of a Schedule I controlled substance is that it has no accepted medical use. That's what a Schedule I controlled substance is. Do you see that in his definition of it here? No, it says an extremely dangerous drug. We know that this has an accepted medical use. It does internationally. Everyone knows that. That's accepted. The citizens of the Commonwealth have accepted that. So it's just absurd to say that, to rely on the Schedule I nature of marijuana to say it has no accepted medical use. We know it does. The problem is that we need Congress to act to change that. And I'm not going to hold my breath to get Congress to do anything these days, no less reschedule marijuana. So we know that it has accepted medical use. Its Schedule I nature is something out of the Nixon era, and that should be changing and should change.
Can I ask you one quick question about it? One thing that caught my attention was this concept of medical marijuana diversion that he mentioned. So, I mean, I'd like to hear you address that. I mean, that struck me because I had this picture of everyone who goes to this facility is going to have legitimate medical conditions, and they're going to be patients, they're going to get the appropriate dose, they're going to take it home, they're going to use it for the medical condition. So
sure.
It strikes me a little bit that there appears to be, from this data, diversion of medical marijuana dispensed marijuana that's making its way to kids and people who it's not intended
So,
for. Is any of that data accurate, or what?
Oh, please, I'm sorry. No, so another thing I heard was that comparing Colorado as the most comparable state to Massachusetts when it comes to, all the data here is from Colorado. Colorado is a largely recreational marijuana program.
No,
right?
they're saying medical marijuana. So I don't know if that's accurate or not. They're not saying recreational use made its way to kids. They're saying medical marijuana, marijuana dispensed from a medical dispensary made its way to kids. So how is that controlled?
I'm not gonna pretend like that's never happened, right? Well, I'm not gonna lie. Of course, I'm not gonna pretend like that's never happened. I think what we have here is a serious overstatement of the instances of that happening. If you go to the Walgreens and you buy 80 milligram OxyContins, what's happening with those things? They're getting sold on the street, and we have a heroin epidemic in the Commonwealth. When we talk about, if somebody buys alcohol and they keep it in their cupboard, what happens then? Kids steal their parents' alcohol, right? So marijuana, we're actually getting, and this doesn't happen at Walgreens, this doesn't happen at the liquor store, we're getting our patients to sign an acknowledgement form dictating that they're going to store this in such a manner as not to let kids have access. On top of that, we're going to do it in child-proof containers. So that's exactly what we're going to use, is child-proof containers. On top of that, every package of marijuana that's sold is going to be barcoded. We'll know exactly who bought it, when they bought it, how much they bought. If any time any one of those packages ever winds up in the hands of a child in the high school locker, then that patient is getting reported to the Department of Public Health. You know what they did when they passed this law in 2012? They created 2 new crimes that didn't exist in the Commonwealth. I come from California. I mean, I live here. I've lived here for years. I'm raising my kids here. I'm a Massachusetts person, but I also come from California. You think California is liberal? Massachusetts has the most liberal marijuana laws of anywhere I've heard in the state, in the country. You can have 50 pounds of marijuana in Massachusetts possessed with intention to sell and wind up with a misdemeanor. So what they did to prohibit that in this industry, they created 2 new crimes when this went through in 2012. One crime is a 6-month jail time for any patient who diverts marijuana for non-medical use. 6 months, right? So if you can go buy marijuana, have 50 pounds, sell it, you don't get any jail time. But if you're a patient and you turn around and you divert it for non-medical use, you go away for 6 months. And I can tell you that law enforcement and the Department of Public Health and the Boston Globe are just waiting for that. They are waiting to make an issue out of that. On top of that, anybody who works at ComCan, it's a 5-year felony they created for them diverting medical marijuana. So the idea that, oh gosh, people are just going to come in and just stock up on marijuana and sell it is not possible. On top of that, they check, when you go there, one of the things that should have been mentioned, they check with your card if you've purchased your limit elsewhere. That's why you have to have a live connection to the Department of Public Health website. And they check if you purchased your limit elsewhere, and then you can't buy anymore. You're not even going to be allowed in there. So people stockpiling marijuana and sharing it and all that. Furthermore, this marijuana is sold at an equivalent level of street level prices, okay? We're not going to undercut street level so that people will have an incentive to buy it for cheap and then go resell it. We have to sell it right about street level. If we sell it above street level, people will never come in. They'll just keep buying marijuana on the street, except for people who need specific high CBD strains and whatnot. So we're going to sell. So it's
a quick follow-up question
of
on
course.
that, because I had the impression from reading the materials that you guys were engineering strains of marijuana that reduce the THC and enhance the, I'm going to say the wrong word, medicinal properties of cannabis. So can you speak to that? I mean, are there strains that aren't attractive to the stoners who want to buy pot to get high?
There's absolutely no doubt. So the reason that in Colorado, when Amendment 64 passed, overall medical marijuana sales actually went up. And people would think, why? Now all of a sudden we have recreational legal marijuana. Why wouldn't I just go buy that? Well, there's a couple reasons. One, medical marijuana is tax-free, so it's particularly in the Commonwealth, so it's cheaper than non-medical. But secondly, we actually create strains. The main ingredient that you're thinking of is CBD. And the high CBD strains, like Charlotte's Web, which I think we discussed earlier, have no psychoactive properties. And absolutely, and also the forms of ingestion of high CBD and various other strains, there's actually 9 main ingredients that they test for, as well as all these terpenes and all these other things that are in the plant. And what they do is, they have a supercritical CO2 extraction machine that actually extracts the cannabis, and then they fracture it into its smallest bits. So if I have MS, and I've stopped, this is fantastic. People with MS have actually stopped having their insurance company pay Biogen $30,000 a year for their MS infusion treatments and are actually medicating and eliminating their symptoms with marijuana and slowing the progression. But if I have MS, I don't want to go buy a bag of pot and smoke joints. I want exact, consistent dosages every time. And that's what the medicine that's going to be sold and labeled from ComCan is going to be. So there's absolutely high CBD strains and various strains. But
reverse true, the stoner who lives in that person's household is not going to want that person's...
Oh, no way, it doesn't. There's no psychoactive element to it. But unfortunately, the fact is that soldiers coming back suffering from PTSD actually do benefit from strains with higher THC levels and psychoactive, more psychoactive properties. And they do. And at the public comments, there were 3 public comments in 2013 when the Department of Public Health was writing the 55 pages of regulations that make this such a hurdle for groups like ComCan. And soldiers turned out to those people coming back with PTSD, and they were crying. And they're like, please make sure, add PTSD to the list of conditions we need to have access to. And so it's all all of the above that's helping people, and that's really what's at stake here. We have 1% to 2% of the population who is going to come in there. If there had been an instance that's been reported, if there had been a bag of, with a code that had been reported, we would all know about it. It would be evidence that this is just not what's happening in the Commonwealth. There are so many restrictions between the crimes and the labeling and the child-proof packaging and the limitations on how much, and the fact that you have to be connected to the database when you come in. There's so many limitations on the implementation of this program that make it so much more secure than data from 2012 from Colorado or California or some other state. Massachusetts has done the best job possible in implementing the most highly regulated, safe program for patients. In California, you get patients getting recommendations or certifications, or in layman's terms, a prescription over Skype. In Massachusetts, they have to have an ongoing relationship with their doctor. They have to go back to the doctor a few times a year. The doctor has to review their complete medical history. It's really changing now, and Massachusetts is at the forefront of that. So, I mean, I could go through one by one. Banking. There is a bank. Century Bank takes these accounts, right? So every day, whenever there's a lot of cash, the cash is going to be brought up to Century. They have couriers for you, right? And it is strictly cash right now in Massachusetts because Century says that we want to be transparent with the feds. When you run a transaction over the Star network or something, you can't write that it's a marijuana transaction right now because we're waiting for Congress to act. But in 2014, the Department of Justice and the Financial Crimes Enforcement Unit put out a memorandum telling banks how to take these deposits. So there's a whole host of things they have to do. They do all your background checks. They look at your complete application to the state. They make sure your registration is current. So we have a bank. But in other states like Colorado, people are using ATM and debit. We're just waiting so we can do that completely transparently with the Fed. So it's cash here right now, but it's not cash nationwide. And we have a bank, so there's not tons of cash sitting around. There are more and more recent studies than are cited here for the fact that this is actually safe. It does not promote adolescent drug use or alcohol use. This is actually a safe program, and particularly in Massachusetts. And obviously I'm a little impassioned by this. I do this pretty much every night in one town or another, but unfortunately, I don't always get the opportunity to respond to this reefer madness stuff. And the chairman gave me a nice opening, and I appreciate being able to do it. But I wrote down a bunch of notes, and if you want, I can go through every single part of this and try to pick it apart, and I'd be happy to do so.
Any further questions from the board on that presently? All right. Ma'am, if you'd like to go forward.
Sure. My name is Marnie Houlihan, 26 Clifford Street, and I'm wearing two hats this evening. Do you want to introduce yourself too?
Erin Wheatley, 22 Clifford.
Excuse me, ma'am. Excuse me, ma'am, on the microphone?
Take one of those.
Can we get the microphone turned up a little bit over there? All right.
Is that better?
Please.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, if you do it closer, it does work.
Sure. So the first hat that I'm wearing, I would like to address our fundamentals recreation program because I do think it is a pertinent issue, and we, ComCan, we do believe is in violation of that. So it was mentioned that we are using this for commercial purposes, and according to 105 CMR 430, that we haven't filed an application. So in conferring with the Department of Public Health, since our recreation program serves under 5 children, and let me just read a definition of the recreation camp for children, means any day, primitive or outpost, residential, sports, traveler, trip, camp conducted wholly or in part for recreation or recreational instruction, which has 4 obligatory measures. First, operates for profit or philanthropic or charitable purposes, whether or not a fee is charged. We do operate for free. Serves 5 or more children who are not members of the family or personal guests of the operator. Our intent is to have 4 children at each session. The 5 additional children are actually part of the family, so we are looking to have a recreation program that is under the requirements of CMR 430. 105 CMR 430. The third stipulation is operates for any period of time between June 1st and September 30th of any year, or not more than 14 consecutive days during any other time of the year, and is a recreational camp for children shall also mean any program which promotes or advertises itself as a camp. So I just wanted to be clear. For recreation, we should say we understand the requirements of a recreation camp, which is 5 or more children. That is not what we're doing. We're having a recreation facility on our home property. And based on the bylaws for a basketball court in town has to be, or in a property, has to be on your property. It can't be in the street. So it meets the regulations of town of having a basketball court. Our recreation program is focused on enhancing and give back to the community. And Erin has a presentation that we actually think is important for legal counsel. Our legal counsel, Art Krieger from Anderson Krieger of Cambridge, has supported and agrees that this recreation program meets the requirements of our bylaw. Let me, if you want to go through it.
Excuse me, Mrs. Houlihan, I think on the fact of this, and I would like town council to correct me if I'm wrong, but this here is something that's not in front of our board, and it has nothing to do with what's presently in front of us tonight. And I don't think we should be spending the time discussing it or going forward with it any further than we did in the beginning of this meeting. And in lieu of that, I would like town council to correct me if I'm right or wrong.
I think at this point, you should afford the individuals an opportunity to finish their issue, and then we'll make a comment after that if we need to.
Okay.
So I would allow them to complete their comments
On this athletic.
on what they've presented so
Okay.
far.
Go ahead.
So, first of all, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to speak tonight. We did send a letter to you guys letting you know that we did implement our recreation program. I think we detailed a little bit about the program, and also we put biographies of the adults that are participating in the program. And one of the things that I think you can see from our bio is that we have a history of creating really interesting community and recreation programs in the town of Southborough. One example is that we created a program focused on the storm drains in town. And you would think, well, why would anybody put together a program like that? That doesn't even sound like something anyone would be interested in. But actually, we wrote and implemented a program in the, what school was that? In the no, it was the lower one. In the Finn School for first graders to come out with a naturalist and to look at storm drains and understand the impact of the water that flows in the drains and the impact of pouring anything like gasoline or oil or anything down that drain. I'm just using that to highlight an example of a program that we've created. We also created a program where we had 400 kids paint tiles of images from our town, including the townhouse, the fire department, old stone walls, and belted cows. We, the folks that put together this program, we glazed all of those tiles, fired them, built wood frames, and hung these tiles in the rotunda in Woodward School. And it was quite a major undertaking, and if you ever have a chance to go over and see it, it's amazing. So along with those types of programs, we've been involved in all aspects of town sports, including basketball. Again, this is highlighted on our bios. Our kids play constantly, and they can pretty much be found down at Nary School with a bunch of their friends. And the reason that I'm giving this background is because we're not coming out of nowhere. We're not somebody who just came up with an idea. We are people who develop programs and implement them, carry them out successfully. We have many friends here and residents of the town whose children have participated in these programs. And so what I'd like to do is continue on and talk a little bit about the program that we did put together. So we wanted to create a program that would really allow our kids who are now entering high school to really engage with the town, learn how to give back to the community, and also mentor younger kids. So there's a very strong rationale behind how this program was developed. And again, we've developed, I think there's a list of at least 12 to 15 programs that we've developed over our time in Southborough. So Fundamentals was brewing, and it came to fruition this year as our boys entered 9th grade. Now, we chose 26 Clifford as the recreation facility to implement our program because the basketball court is of high quality with an adjustable hoop, and we all know we will have access during the different times. So there are a lot of basketball courts in town, for sure. And if you go around town at any given time, those courts are in use, thank goodness, by our kids. There's a lot of pickup games. A lot of programs are being held where a lot of the older kids and the high school kids, and actually young adults, and even some of the fathers and moms in town are playing basketball. So we really wanted to have a court that we could access at the times that we wanted to host our program. So in the guide that I gave on the last 2 pages, you can actually see the actual basketball hoop itself and the quality of the hoop. And then you can also see that it is a half-court basketball court. The lines have not been put in place yet because of the weather. It has to be above a certain temperature for the lines to be put into place, so we weren't able to put those in. Our kids have but we do have that on schedule to have those installed as soon as the weather is of the proper temperature. We'll be putting up lines to delineate the court, and we'll also have lines for a free throw box, because we plan on spending a lot of time teaching the kids how to do free throws. My husband always says the game is won and lost at the free throw line, so I think that's really important. Our kids have already been working to put together drills and fun games and have committed to this program. We hosted an open house and have been warmly welcomed by the town with over 116 likes from the parents and kids on our Facebook page that we created. And we're pretty much ready to go. Again, our court has Gorilla Glass backed multi-level hoop to accommodate kids of many ages. The drive is freshly paved and sealed. We have lighting if needed, though I doubt we'll host nighttime programs. We are scheduled to have the court lines and free throw box painted. We have open space for sportsmanship training stations. We're fully insured. We did register with the town of Southborough. We have 14 children enrolled waiting for us to start our program. The facility is open to the public through invitation, and we just wanted to make sure that you knew about it, because according to the special permit bylaws, this recreation program precludes the ability of the board issuing a special permit to CONCAM.
Mr. Cipriano?
Thank you for the opportunity of responding to you now that you've referenced me.
Your mic, sir.
Yeah, I'm sorry. May I ask you, who is your legal counsel at Anderson Krieger?
Arthur Krieger.
And has he rendered to you a formal legal opinion as to use in the town of Southborough?
He's rendered a formal opinion on the recreation facility itself, the program.
Under state law?
According to our bylaw, he interpreted the Southborough bylaw.
And did he give you an opinion in that effect?
He did.
Do you have that opinion tonight?
I do not have it with me.
Okay.
It was a verbal discussion, and I had not asked him to put it in writing because I was not asked for that.
Let me say to the board that, first of all, it's admirable, obviously, for any residents to attempt to support or to create recreational uses for the residents or the children of the town. And it's fine that you specify state requirements or regulations, but the issue at hand is zoning compliance under our local bylaw. And as I said earlier, the compliant officer is the zoning officer. When you indicate in your handout that you're registered in the town of Southborough, do you mean the business certificate you filed with the town clerk?
Yes.
That is not a registration. That is not a permit, and it's not a license. It is a certificate under Chapter 110 for consumer purposes, identifying some form of a business entity so that creditors know who the truth is about who owns the operation if claims have to be made, and has no standing under zoning. Here is the fundamental legal issue relative to what you're presenting. We need to go back to the bylaw and what constitutes a basketball court. It indicates a soccer field, which has certain dimensions, a hockey rink, which has certain dimensions, a baseball and football fields also, which have certain dimensions, and of course, a basketball court. Respectfully, looking at the picture of your residence, that's a hoop at the turnaround of a driveway. That's not a basketball court in my interpretation, which has to be fully perimetered and detailed so that there's action on both ends with two nets. However, the determinant of that what constitutes a basketball court is not me. It's the building commissioner as zoning enforcement officer. So to cure or address that once and for all, I think you should ask the building commissioner his interpretation of what constitutes a basketball court under the bylaw.
I agree with that 100%. Mr. Robidoux?
So there's a couple different things going on here tonight. So I looked at what they're trying to do, and it looks like they're doing a recreational program. So I'm not sure how the recreational program would translate into a recreational facility. And again, I read this, and it looks like soccer field, baseball field, football field, basketball court. So I said, well, you know what? I think I know what a basketball court is, but I'm not sure I know what a basketball court is. So I Googled it. I Wikipedia'd it. And I got all the information I could on a basketball court. Now, basketball courts come generally in 3 different sizes: a high school, a college, and a professional basketball court. But generally, they're 94 by 50 feet. One of the things that it has, they're all lined. They have 3-point areas. There's sidelines. There's foul lines. There's things like that. One of the things is it's mirrored, so one side is mirrored to the other side. So you'd have to have an identical side to be a basketball court. So I wish them all the luck in the world. I don't see it as a basketball court. I see it as a driveway with a basketball hoop. I mean, provided they went to the ZBA for a special permit, and provided the ZBA said, we're gonna give them the special permit to run this business. The other thing that's important to look at, when you look at this, it says for whether publicly or privately owned. And I think the confusion is, when you say privately owned, it doesn't mean a single-family house. It means that it's privately owned by a big company that has a hockey rink or an indoor sports facility, and then, publicly would be your town or state or federal government. So that's what that means. So, provided that you were to give them that special permit, they would still have to meet other requirements. For instance, they need bathrooms. They need to meet parking. They need to meet accessibility requirements. So, I wish them all the luck in the world. I personally don't see it as a recreational facility.
I would like to make a comment and have you comment on me. I know that in the past 20 years, there's been 2 different facilities that came in front of this town for recreation in residential districts. And because they were done that way, it becomes spot zoning. And neither one of them were permitted because of that, because it's a residential district with a commercial business of recreation. So how does that affect this, it comes in front of this board? Also, if the marijuana bylaw is passed, then that, as far as I understand, being involved with the bylaw in the original, that this facility can't go near that, as far as building within the 500 feet of a marijuana facility. So that's something that, are some major issues that these people need to know about, because I don't know if they do technically or not. And my comment to you is that, am I wrong or somewhat correct in what
I
I'm
would
saying?
defer to town council if he wants to comment on that.
Well, let me say that it's not fair to really raise a spot zoning issue without having a permit before you or an application for a permit, so that's, I would say that's irrelevant. The fundamental concern or issue here is it's being presented as a use, and they've addressed maybe criteria under state law, but they have not obtained, from what I'm understanding, the requisite zoning relief for the town of Southborough to operate this facility. So it doesn't legally exist. That's the issue.
Okay, thank you.
Can you direct us to where that zoning regulation is to run a program with 4 kids in it that we have to have a permit?
Sure. It's 174-8.1. 2.2, and it would be letter B. And what that would refer to is a residential A zone, and you're looking to do some sort of a camp, and it requires a special permit.
It's not a camp, though. We've already defined that it's under the limit of being defined as a camp by the state of Massachusetts.
I'm trying to give you the benefit of the doubt that it's a camp, because if it's not a camp, it's not an allowed use, and then you would require a variance as opposed to a special permit.
They would need both.
Can I ask Mr. Rubidoux a quick question before
Yes.
while he's up here?
Yes.
The other part that I'm interested in your interpretation is the public right of access. So, when I think of a park or a basketball court, I think of a park that my girls go to all the time in Fayetteville. It's a public park that's open to the public. They can go there whenever they want. The public has access to it. Versus, if my wife runs an acupuncture business inside our house, her clients can come there, but the public doesn't, I guess in my mind, really have a right of general public access to my house, even though it's a facility that she's running. Can you speak to that as to the public access element of this?
Well, I mean, I think like what you're talking about is like, say there's a tennis court, and it's a private tennis court. You have to be a member to get in. Well, not everybody can go into the tennis court, but if you're a member, you could go there. So that would be one issue. Or if it has to be publicly or privately held is basically the way I'm looking.
Yeah, I'm focused more on the public access, because if hypothetically, if this were this program that people who are involved in the program can go to, but the general public in general can't go to the Houlihan's house and start shooting hoops whenever they feel like it.
That's my point. The point is that what the bylaw talks about is privately or publicly owned, and privately doesn't mean a single-family house. I can't go over there and start walking around their backyard and playing basketball.
Well, it does say by invite, and it doesn't say privately owned by a commercial entity. It just says privately owned. So you could have a home where you have a dance studio in your basement that's your business that you invite people to, and that could fall under the rules of a recreation facility.
I'd love to see the documentation from your legal counsel, because I'd certainly like to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, we're happy to get that.
Well, and I would love to see it too, but that is no impediment to the continued consideration of whether or not you decide you want to grant a permit.
Of this, and the other issue which I agree on is the fact that this is something that would be done in the future or whatever, but it's not something that I think we should spend any more time unless the board wants to discuss it, because I don't think it's proper. And does the board disagree in my comment?
I agree with you 100%.
Mr. Chairman, if I could make one other point.
Yes.
The handout from Dr. Medina, as I read it, and I understand the council feels that some of it's not relevant, and that may be the case, but admittedly, Dr. Medina has started to delve into the specific criteria of the bylaw, which is what this is all about. Is what this board is going to have to do is they're going to have to weigh in for what is in the bylaw that would permit it, or the concerns you have to have. So that's somewhat the theme of what ultimately has got to be decided by the board. And I know that many of the members understand that. So you need to afford the applicant the opportunity. He said, well, do you want me to address all that? Quite frankly, you should, because they've been concisely presented by Dr. Medina, and the issue is now on the table. And you need to tell the board how your application addresses all of the general criteria for special permit and the specific criteria for a marijuana dispensary clinic under subsection J. I would suggest that.
I've got a question for the board. In consideration of what Mr. Cipriano is stating, which I agree in, that I think that due to the fact it's something that was just presented to us tonight at the table, and I think it needs to be studied and reviewed. So I think that may be a reason that we're consider to have a continuance eventually on this meeting and have it come up at another meeting to be discussed, which would give the applicant the opportunity to review it. It'll give us the personal opportunity to review it and all. So I think something that right now that the board thinks about, if that's something they would be considering, which would go on forward tonight with what we're doing. We're not going to stop now, but I think it's something that should be taken up at further, and I think it needs to be studied by everybody first. And so what is the opinion of the board? Do you agree with me on that?
I do. I mean, I think that pamphlet was presented here. I think the applicant should have an opportunity to respond to it, so I think we should give them an opportunity to give us.
What about the other members agree?
I just think that the presentation, it mainly concerned with the use, but not necessarily the use in this particular location. And I think the special permit application is about this use at this location, so I don't know. I don't really see the need to continue, but I don't know how
I
the
think in
applicant
what
feels.
town council is saying, I think is right about that, as far as the way it should be entertained.
Well, it is the decision, not of town council, it's the decision
Of the board, I understand, but as far as a recommendation being stated, I think that in the general process, for the abutters especially, that it was brought up, and I think it should be entertained thoroughly and properly as we go on with this, but it's something that can't be just done tonight, I don't think. So if the applicant would be in favor of doing it at a different later, number one, and if the board, or at least two more members of the board agree that to do that is something we need to discuss first.
I tend to take Andrew's position that I don't necessarily see the need for it, but if the board agrees that we need to hold off, then we can hold off.
You agree? Yeah.
You agree with Andrew?
I agree with Andrew. I'm going with the consensus.
I agree with Andrew also.
I mean, one consideration, if I could just give the counterpoint to that, I mean, one of the standards that the opponents are asking us to consider as the basis to deny the permit is whether it's detrimental or offensive to the neighborhood. I mean, there's all these objective standards of whether it's on Route 9 and whether it's, whether it's got the right signage, they're pretty objective, but the squishy, broad standard that they're asking us to apply is whether it's detrimental or offensive to the neighborhood. And so I think that the handout goes to that because it's alleging all sorts of, adverse impacts from medical marijuana dispensaries, and they're asking us to draw the conclusion that if this goes in, this will be detrimental to the neighborhood because of those offenses. So that's why I think that it's relevant to our consideration of that criteria in our bylaw. And, I think that they've presented it here without presenting it ahead of time. The applicant hasn't had a chance to digest it, respond to it in a formal sense. So that's why I think that it would be fair to give the applicant an opportunity to.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, would the applicant want to have this continued to further explain?
Well, I promised to do it less passionately, but I'm confident that I could go through, but I won't have the specificity of citations that he has. I know the American Medical Association, for instance, has said that medical marijuana jurisdictions decrease opioid mortality rates by 25%. And I would expect a specialist in opioid mortality rates to do that. That's not Americans for Safe Access or NORML. That's the American Medical Association. And that's a study this year, in the last 12 months. 24.8% decrease in opioid mortality rates from the AMA. Can I give you the exact citation of the date that article came out with the specificity that there is in here? No, I can't do that off the top of my head, but I can give you, specific, instances of studies that I'd be able to produce that pretty much contradict virtually everything in here. Where it's possible to contradict, it's tough to prove a negative, right? I mean, you can't do that, but other than that, there is the overwhelming evidence now is that in well-regulated marijuana jurisdictions, crime does not go up, property values in fact do go up, substance abuse among adolescents and alcohol abuse goes down or stays the same. Well, so.
Excuse me. Go forward.
So I mean, those are the actual facts, not the, but so can I give you a citation for each one of them? Frankly, if I got in my phone for a couple minutes, I probably could give you a citation for everything I just said. And if you'd like to give me that afford me that convenience, I'd be happy to do it. And we can go through this page by page, and I would be happy to do that. But the zoning bylaw, the town, by over 2/3 majority, by over 2/3 vote, picked that location for this use. So if we're going to talk about that this use all of a sudden is detrimental, the 2/3 of the town voted for that location. There were maps. They went back and
But that
forth.
applies no matter what, right? Even if we were gonna put, you know, a restaurant in the middle of a zone that was zoned for restaurant, we still have the criteria whether it's detrimental to the neighborhood, even if it was in a zone that was permitted for restaurants. So I don't think it's quite right to say that simply by virtue of being in a zone where this is permitted, it by definition means it's not detrimental to the neighborhood.
And of
Thing-
course, yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
The thing that I think the board needs to be aware of, and I mean, I would hope that they are, but just in case, is the fact that the reason the town of Southborough did this bylaw was to the fact that which it was because if we didn't do the bylaw, the state could come in and put a marijuana facility anywhere in the town of Southborough they would like. Now, there are two towns that I know of. One is in the western part of the state and in the southern part of the state, which haven't done that, which are being appealed in the state of Massachusetts presently on that, to put two marijuana facilities in these two towns that have no permits or anything to do it. And the thing is, there's something that I think we need to do properly for the town, is to make sure that if we do approve it, or if we don't, it's done properly, because if it goes to the state, it then could get appealed and go the other way on us. So I think it's something that we need to take into good consideration. I think it's very strong that what the doctor presented is something that should be looked at and brought forward, and whatever else comments that we get from the rest of these people tonight is something that we think about and talk about and, you know, consider it properly before we get to the end of the process. So I would personally consider, that the board would consider of doing that, so we can go forward, even though, I mean, you.
My concern is that to have something that rebuts what Dr. Medina said, this is gonna have to get into medical studies, technical stuff. I'm not gonna read these studies. I'm not a doctor. I don't know a statistician. I don't know how to evaluate this stuff. And I think that, frankly, I think there's one slide in the presentation, the location poses high risk to school kids, and it analyzes the effect of the use on this location. So I think that is something that's really tailored to this application, but just as a volunteer board member, I have no idea how to evaluate
Well, if
whether.
you read the state.
I just know that the voters approved it.
Right, but
That's
if
all.
you read the state and the federal regulations, it does explain a lot of that, and that was my reason to ask the applicant, because I presume he knows all about it, because he's presented a lot of it that would help answer the questions for the board. So that's why I think it would be proper to let him do that for us, and let him come back with the comments. I mean, I don't think he's gonna lie to us, he's gonna be proper and tell us the
But
proper
I think I know
way.
what he's gonna say. He's gonna say that the medical marijuana is not bad and does not have all these bad effects, and it's just the whole, you know.
If you read the federal and state regulations, you'll find that out. It's in there written down, and I think that's something that you can explain at least.
Here's one point of this that rises on this particular application, is that it is in a zone that's permitted for, or it's in a zone where this use is permitted by special permit. The only site they've been able to get is a site that happens to be probably nearer to a school than they would like it to be, and nearer to a residential area than they would like it to be, even though it's more than 500 feet. If it were across Route 9 on the other side, maybe they wouldn't have these issues. So, I mean, if the doctor's program raises issues like, you know, impact on kids for being in proximity to the marijuana dispensary, you know, I think those are issues that could factor into our equation as to whether this is detrimental to the neighborhood or not, given this particular site. So that's why I you know, the doctor said a bunch of things that, you know, would potentially sway us. It would be helpful to me to have the applicant come back and say that's true or not true, or there's additional factors and studies that counteract that. So.
The other thing that needs to be put forward, that originally when this went to town meeting and it was originally being opposed, that the 1,000-foot buffer zone was considered and talked about. But due to the fact that if the 1,000-foot buffer zone is put in, basically it eliminates allowing it anywhere, and then we're gonna go under the state regulation of controlling the town of Southborough. And that's why at town meeting, it was reduced down to the 500 feet. You know, so so I just think that if they did that, it would just make it clearer and everything for the board. And the residents also, that can, you know.
Did you have something to say, Mr. Rosenbaum?
Just in terms, before we lose the sight of it, because it was a valid point, your reference, your analogy to a restaurant, if you're zoned for restaurant use by special permit, you still appear before this board in terms of the actual application. But you don't appear before this board to say, well, we don't think that there should be a restaurant here. So if it's particular to our presentation and to our group, then absolutely.
No, you do, because if it's a use by special permit, it's not permitted as of right. So they said, we're gonna, the zoning, the town board of selectmen enact zoning that says, okay, this is a particular use that we're gonna generally allow in our town, generally in these zones, but not as of right. We're gonna make it by special permit so that each individual application can be evaluated by the permit granting authority to determine whether that specific application has adverse effects on that particular neighborhood, right? So just because it's allowed by special permit doesn't mean that it's automatically allowed in that particular zone.
With complete deference to the chair and to the board, if you would like something, you know, we just assume answer any questions we can tonight and have a vote. If it's the preference of the board, we're happy to. I would be concerned that new potential issues would be raised that could not possibly be foreseen at a future hearing, that might, based on the decision you make tonight, force another and another and another. If the issues are all on the table and you would like specific responses to them, then that can be presented. You could take your vote contingent upon receiving the responses. We defer to the board.
All right, I think what we should do is we should hold off for a little while on this and get any more comments made by the residents. And then after the comments are all made, then we can rediscuss the subject, okay? So, sir, would you like to go forward?
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Stephen Valentine. I live on John Matthews Road. I know many of us had a very long day, so I'll be concise. I would like to start to say to Desiree, I'm very sincerely sorry for your grandfather's suffering. I know that there is a need for medical marijuana. I'm not here to get up here and dispute that. That being said, I'm a special agent with Homeland Security Investigations. Prior to that, I was a trooper, and I was also a full-time police officer in this town for 5 years. I'm very familiar with the dynamics of this town, as well as the implications of controlled substances, money laundering, and the crime that can come along with it. I'll quickly reiterate that this is very powerful marijuana. It generates a great deal of money, and yes, you could see an increase in crime. One of the few things I'm certain of specific to this business, and then we'll get into the location because it is a zoning board, is you will have an issue with diversion. It's just the nature of the business. The Drug Enforcement Administration, I have very close friends. They have 2 large full-time task force here in Worcester and here in Boston, and all they focus on is diversion. So you will have an issue with that. Moving along, to talk specifically about this location, there is no question in my mind, 0, that we will have an increase in impaired and distracted driving. There's no question in my mind. Specific to this location, it's a very difficult spot as you're coming up that hill. People come looking for this, they're gonna miss their turn, the GPS is gonna have them take a right onto Deerfoot, then a right onto Clifford, right back down around to Route 9. This community has become full of young children.
Excuse me, so you need to stay at the mic.
Sorry. This community is full of young children. We have our bus stops there. There is a great deal of walkers, runners. This is a very small, tight-knit community. This particular location is gonna be a detriment to our community. Yes, it is outside of the 1,000 feet of the law, and I'll take a step back. This is still a federal crime. Right now, the federal government is exercising prosecutorial discretion. That could change tomorrow. Again, there is the spirit of the law, 500 feet versus 1,000, and the letter of the law. I can't stress that one incident, one of our kids getting run over, one B&E. Again, I was a police officer in this town for 5 years. I remember an individual broke into 6 homes in the matter of an hour. Those residents couldn't sleep for weeks, and it was just a simple B&E. He came in, he took what he wanted, and he left. One incident is too many. The liability on our town, the liability on us is simply not worth the gains. I'll take another step back. There's a medical marijuana facility in the next town over. There may be one in Westborough, there may be one in Northborough. We are not going to deprive our residents who need medical marijuana. There's home delivery services. I implore you to please consider this carefully. I speak from personal experience. Lastly, I just had a question. I haven't done my due diligence on it, but with such a great deal of cash in a facility like this, I would imagine you have incredibly strict security procedures. Do those procedures include cutting down the landscaping to open it up so you can see the approach? Do those procedures, would that require you to put a great deal of lighting, which is going to be lighting up someone's backyard? Again, these are all concerns. I wish you well. I have, no ill will towards you. This is just a particularly very bad location. Thank you for your time.
One comment I will make on what you said on the end, as far as the lighting and stuff like that, that all goes through a plan in front of the planning board, which, if they do lighting like they normally do all the time, the lighting will be the same as done with recreation. It'll be done so it doesn't go off of the site, and it goes the opposite way of the residents. It won't do any. So that'll be a regulation done by the planning board after approval of this. If it gets approved, that it would go and it would be controlled by that. And as far as screening and different things like that would be done. Okay, thank you, sir. Yes.
Just procedurally, deferring to the chair, should we respond as they come, or should we hold and take notes? How would you like to see it, or should we not at all?
Say that again now.
Should we respond to any issues raised, or should we wait until there's
No,
an
you can make a
aggregate?
comment on what was just said if you'd like. Yes.
Just very quickly, and I absolutely appreciate the role of law enforcement here. So I have some close friends that are in the state police. I am not opposed to law enforcement. They do a fantastic job. There were just a couple things that weren't really accurate, unfortunately, and it's just a problem when you're coming from a federal law enforcement perspective and you just sort of see it only through that lens. But the fact is that the cash that comes through this business is accounted for in the seed-to-sale tracking program, and every single gram of marijuana that's sold or produced is accounted for in their software, and they have to do concise reports to Century Bank as part of Century Bank's requirements under the financial crime enforcement guidance. If $1 is not in the right row, it becomes a huge. It's not something that's even really conceivable. And so the idea.
He wasn't talking about.
We mentioned money laundering is what he mentioned. So
Okay. He was talking about people
money laundering is a 40
to steal the money, the cash that's in the.
Yeah, money laundering is a 40-year crime, right? We got 2 lawyers and 5 doctors, who starting this thing. I mean, 5 doctors probably, overstating it, but we have 2 lawyers. So the next thing is the DEA. So what he was referring to, what the officer was referring to, was the Cole 2 memo, which Deputy Attorney General Cole, that was issued in August of 2013. And I actually think that memo was actually written specifically for the Commonwealth. We had very famously Congressman Delahunt, was United States Congressman, was opening a dispensary here. And a couple weeks before our dispensary program started, the Department of Justice, Eric Holder's right-hand man, issued a memorandum saying that the Department of Justice would not enforce the Controlled Substances Act in well-regulated marijuana jurisdictions unless they implicate some other law enforcement priority, like money laundering or danger to children or drug cartels, right? And so we have a sufficient setback here that it does not implicate even the 1,000-foot. That is actually what the 1,000-foot rule is under the federal law, is a sentencing aggravation, right? It's an aggravating factor in sentencing if you're convicted of a controlled substance violation. So we have that 1,000-foot buffer. When you do property line to property line, we're at the 600-foot plus. But for many schools, we are building to building more than 1,000 foot away. Furthermore, that Cole 2 memo, while it's still very important and very binding, and whenever I work on a lease, I include the Cole 2 language, the United States Congress has defunded the Department of Justice from conducting raids on medical marijuana facilities. They can't spend $1 on doing that. So there's no more prosecutorial discretion. That ship has sailed. There's really only 9 states left in the United States without some sort of legalized marijuana, whether it's a medical program, whether it's completely legal, whether it's a under an ounce decriminalization. There's only 9 states left. So just going back to the whole idea that there's this, this push by the feds, and any moment it could change. That's done. We're moving the other direction. Even if Donald Trump became president and made Chris Christie the Attorney General, we're still moving forward the way we are, and medical marijuana is here, and it's here in Massachusetts in the Commonwealth in a very safe manner. Finally, there's no medical marijuana facility in any next town over. There's no medical marijuana facility operating in Framingham. There's no operating in Northborough, Southborough, Middleborough. There's no medical marijuana facility operating in any of these towns.
Middleborough is actually not near Southborough.
Okay, excuse me.
What did you say? Excuse me.
Middleborough is not near Southborough.
The closest one that I know of that is near Southborough, which is just permitted, is in Lowell.
Yeah, so, well, there's...
That's
But you
not
guys are
o-
working on one in Framingham, right?
That's
which is
not
pretty
opened
close.
yet.
I'm sorry?
You guys are working on one in Framingham, which is on Route 9, which would be accessible to Southborough residents.
So Framingham issued three letters of support or non-opposition. There were 181 applications that first went in November of 2013. There are 6 dispensaries open today. There were 15, well, there are actually 20 registered on January 31st of 2014, and then during that year, give or take, some moved back and forth. We wound up with 15 dispensaries with provisional registrations. Again, there are 6 open. Just because Framingham issued a letter of support or non-opposition doesn't mean that any of those dispensaries are going to get open, and if they do, it's probably not going to be for a few years. So we can't look at Framingham and the fact that they issued a letter and say that all of a sudden we're magically going to have a dispensary there. If you look at the odds of a dispensary actually getting open, even if they get a provisional registration from the department, they're pretty darn slim. And so, we can't just point to the fact that Framingham engaged in a permitting process like many cities and towns are and saying we're going to have an open dispensary there. It doesn't follow. So and I really appreciate what law enforcement is doing, and I absolutely, we couldn't have a medical marijuana program without the input of law enforcement. That's why we met with the chief multiple times here. So I absolutely appreciate it. I just think that we want to look clearly at what's actually happening at the federal level as far as this program is concerned.
The comment has been made about the cash and the money, that when you were at the selectmen's meeting, I remember, and I thought you had stated, because you were asked by one of the selectmen as far as removing the cash from the premises, and I thought that you said that between 2 and 3 in the afternoon that it would be removed off the premises to a bank or something. Wasn't there some kind of a comment like that?
There may have been a comment like that. We wouldn't have broadcast the time that cash would be removed.
The exact time.
Yeah, so it's not going to be between 2 and 3 in the afternoon. I believe what we said, it would be randomized throughout the day, so it would never always be between 2 and 3 in the afternoon, perhaps.
Because I know
perhaps
that
was
question
said.
did come up at that meeting.
That's absolutely correct, Mr. Chairman. So there's going to be frequent cash sweeps from the front of the house from the registers. That cash will go into the back, into the safe with a drop. You're not going to have to open the safe every time it goes into a drop. And then Century Bank has companies that they recommend that you can use to pick up the cash, or ComCan can hire their own security personnel to pick up the cash. You're not going to use an armored car where it's obvious you're moving cash. And, honestly, the dispensaries, yes, they do make money. There is a big fiction that dispensaries are making all this money. If you look at In Good Health in Brockton was one of the first dispensaries open. I know that they're not sitting on tons and tons of piles of cash. If you look at Greenleaf in Rhode Island, they're barely making it by on a shoestring budget. They're borrowing money from their family to keep this thing moving forward. So there's a big notion that everybody's going to get stinking rich, and it's a big green rush of marijuana, and there's going to be big piles of cash pulled in and out of here. I do think ComCan is going to do this far more responsibly than some other groups, and they're going to be able to keep it afloat. But this is not, it just doesn't, it's not that simple, and it doesn't make that much money. There's a significant amount of overhead involved with these things as well. So the cash will get picked up frequently, Mr. Chairman, and I hope that helps to answer, because you're absolutely right. We did discuss that with the Board of Selectmen, and it will be picked up frequently.
Any more public comments?
Hi, my name is Molly Megan. I'm at 8 Fitzgerald Lane, and I'm a registered nurse. I just wanted to say that I think, part of this comes down to common sense. I'm trying to figure out where, in our bylaws that the town created, why it's okay to have this dispensary 500 feet from an elementary school, but we're not considering the people that live much closer with their kids. that live right on Clifford Road, right on John Matthews. I'm failing to see that connection and how that it's even being considered, where there's kids and these neighbors and not only their properties, but I'm talking about the kids playing outside, but yet we're saying it has to be 500 feet or from a school.
The major issue, which this is, some people in town probably don't know, is the fact that on Route 9 is where the bulk of our commercial property is. There's one piece of property that is 275 feet off of Route 9. Everything else is even closer, and that is abutted by residential property all in the back of it. So no matter where you go up and down Route 9, within an average of 100 to 125 feet, there's residential property right behind the commercial business village districts. So they would be everywhere, it would be that way. And that was something in the discussion of the permit that you couldn't get away of. The thing of the schools was something which was under the state regulations and comments that were considered of those distances.
So I guess my question would be this to you guys, as a board and members of this town. Is there nothing better that could go into this location with regard to what the doctor said and all the safety issues involved?
Say that again, ma'am, please.
I'm asking you to just think about, would you think there is anything better that could go in this location? This town could use a lot of different things. Is this the best use of this property when making
Yeah, I mean,
your
I don't think that's one of the,
That's not for
the
us to
fairness, it's not one of our, yeah, right, I'm sorry. go ahead,
But it is a choice that we have and that you have as a board. And I really think it doesn't make sense that it's okay to be 500 feet from a school with children, but yet we're not considering the families that live right within 100, 200 feet of this facility. I'm just puzzled by that.
The comment I have to make is that it went to town meeting, and the residents in the town of Southborough, 2/3 of town meeting, voted in favor of this. So it's why it ended up the way it did, ma'am.
In favor of, they didn't know what location you were discussing, and
Yes, they did. It was,
no, because
excuse me, it was specified in a map, shown color-wise at the town meeting, showing the different locations it could go at. And that was done at town meeting. It was a map that showed Route 9 and the areas. I said, Mr. Semino, you do correct me if I'm wrong about that map. I know we worked together at doing it, but it showed the locations where it would go at the 500-foot buffer zone. Am I wrong? Would you please give Mr. Semino your mic for a minute?
I think the confusion is, the map showed a zone. 255 was included in the zone. Town meeting didn't specifically consider 255. It considered an overall zone, so, I mean, you're both right.
But it did show the zone on
Yes.
Route 9 and where it was.
Yes.
Pacifical, one lot or whatnot wasn't, but the general zone did show.
and I'm sure the people that voted for it didn't live right here, the 2/3 of the people. I mean, it's just something I'm saying, it just doesn't make sense to me that it's okay to be 500 feet from an elementary school, but yet you've got children much closer in these neighborhoods. That's all, I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
There's still four of us.
Yes, Ms. Houlihan.
Thank you, Marnie Houlihan again, 26 Clifford. Now I'm wearing my Clifford Street hat. So just a couple of questions for the zoning board and your diligence here. So I just wanted to ask a question around frontage for this use. So is there any frontage requirement for this particular building? And so with the traffic that may or may not come in, I know it's somewhat unpredictable, as ComCan has suggested, based on the patients. I understand that the traffic that it imposes, the number of patients that come in and out, is quite significant. Some Brookline data that just came in, there were 26 patients that visited in 15 minutes. Some drove, some walked. So I think it's trying to understand, they estimated 55 patient visits a day in the Brookline facility. They had 26 in 15 minutes. So I wanted to just understand how we are thinking about the implications of the location for pulling in and out. As you know, it's a tricky place on Route 9 to pull in and out of. The parking, is it adequate to facilitate the number of cars, and then what that impact will be? We all know the impact of Route 9 traffic. And so that was the first question that I had for you. The second was around the single tenant. So you had mentioned you're only going to occupy the first level. I don't know if it's a double occupancy building, if that's a single occupancy or double occupancy. So I think that I would need that answered. But if it is a double occupancy, do you get all the parking privileges at the facility?
The thing on that is, Mrs. Houlihan, is that if it got approved by this board, it then goes in front of the planning board. And that's where the parking issue and entrance and everything would come up and be a major issue, not in front of our board. That would be something that would be their responsibility to do, and the way it would happen and the way it would work.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first, in just reading the first paragraph of your permit, the special permitting, no special permit shall issue except upon a general finding that the use sought and its characteristics shall be in harmony with the intent and purpose of this chapter, shall not be in conflict with public health, safety, convenience, and welfare, and shall not be substantially detrimental or offensive to the neighborhood or destructive of property values within. So I guess the question from the diligence side of things, are you from a satisfaction level, just safety, the traffic impact? I don't know, I have not heard the frequency of how the number of patients will impact the safety of the community in and on Route 9, the traffic issues. I understand that's not within your jurisdiction, but I think in your vision statement in the opening paragraph, you as a board have to consider that statement, that shall not be in conflict with public health, safety, convenience, and welfare.
When we go to do our decision in favor or against, that would be something that would be discussed, which could come on, if it got approved, it may be under some kind of a certain condition or whatever, or it may go the other way completely. But it would be something at that time that the board would discuss.
Thank you. My last
To take
comment
care
is
of
my
it.
public plea for this zoning board to deny the special permit for the applicant at 255 Turnpike. Thank you.
Okay. Any other further personal questions?
Hi, thank you. My name's Nicole Ryan. I live at 53 Deerfoot Road. I appreciate your time, everyone involved in this process. It's obviously a long one, and it should be. I just had 3 areas that I wanted to get more information about. The first one is I would like to make a comment around what Dr. Medina had obviously researched in detail and presented very well this evening for everyone to be able to hear. And with all due respect, the attorney that's present for the applicant, I believe you had mentioned that you are at these meetings every night of the week and everybody gives you pushback because nobody wants it in their town. And I'm sorry for that. However, I do think it's incumbent upon you to look at the data that's been presented and identify the areas that you may or may not believe in. You're obviously much more familiar with the laws and the regulations that surround this industry than any of us in this room, and Dr. Medina went into great detail as to why it's actually not in line with our bylaws for the reasons that he stated. And I think it's important that everyone on the board review it very carefully. I don't see any purpose of pushing this through in any particular time frame. We're coming to you and we're presenting areas. We're not just coming up here and saying my kid's gonna get hit by a guy who's high, right? Because we could do that. What we're presenting to you is areas where we feel that is in direct conflict to the bylaws, whether or not they were passed at town meeting. I was at the town meeting. We won't have to go into the detail of what happened there. Everybody has a different opinion. That was the first idea I wanted to share with you. The second idea, there is a rumor, and this could completely be a rumor, but I would like to bring it up and find out if it's rumor or fact, that if this goes through and if this is open for medical reasons, does that provide the applicant then the ability to apply for a recreational use permit if and when those become available in Massachusetts? And like I said, it could be a complete rumor, but I would like some clarification on that.
That who would apply for the recreation?
the applicant. So if we move forward and this becomes an institution that is, people are using and it's a dispensary, and then the laws change in this state and they become more like Colorado where recreational use, can he at that time submit to get, you get my question, right?
Oh, yeah, when you said it, I misunderstood you because I thought you were talking about basketball or something, but you're talking about recreational marijuana.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. I will
Yeah.
ask the attorney to answer that question.
Excellent.
Will you be running a
Through the
basketball
chair,
camp
if
there?
if I
Yes,
might answer,
sure.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry?
Want to address it in order, or you want to-
Yeah, well,
Did you have further questions before?
I have a
Should we
third
do it?
one. I think the third one is okay. If we just stick with those two, I think we'll be good.
So not every town I'm in front of do I get pushback. I get sometimes unanimous votes without any issue at all. So it's not every town. In fact, I remember one of my, so it's not every town, absolutely. But I think what we talked about, and I can, do you want me to just specifically stick to the recreational answer? Because I think that was what the main inquiry was, if you'd like. And I did find a bunch of studies on, I was able to pull up on my phone that I can talk about as well if you think necessary. But I'll stick to the recreational answer, and you can tell me if you want more from me later. So it's the special permit will absolutely, undoubtedly, all the ones that I've seen will actually have the language that this is a registered marijuana dispensary under 105 CMR 725, blah, blah, blah. It's going to specifically address the medical use of marijuana. So our special permit at that site and the use is going to be medical. So that's something that we're not going to be able to change. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is we operate as Chapter 180 nonprofits under Massachusetts law. Again, we don't get a charitable designation, so we're paid property taxes and whatnot, but we do operate as Chapter 180 nonprofits. A Chapter 180 nonprofit under Massachusetts law, and council can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty certain I'm not, they have to operate for their nonprofit purpose. And the nonprofit purpose is to provide medicine, educational materials, and related products like vaporizers to patients and their caregivers in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So ComCan is never going to be selling recreational marijuana. That's not the nonprofit purpose, right? So finally, we don't need to sell recreational marijuana. Like we talked about, the overall volume of sales of medical marijuana goes up in states that legalize recreational, and so we don't need that. So for those reasons, ComCan can't and doesn't need to. So I think I hope that answers the question.
Well, in that comment, then that would give the board the right in the decision of a conflict that would be something you couldn't do. And it would be something under approval decision of the board for you if it got approved, and that would be stated that you could not do that even though if it got approved by the state. And that's,
Yes, and further to the proposed rumor that's out there, even if you didn't, there's nothing in the ballot initiative, the proposed ballot initiative, that would any way allow us to somehow convert to recreational at this specific address. It's just not part of it. A medical dispensary just does not become a recreational dispensary by virtue of this ballot initiative.
Yeah, but let's be a little cynical here. I mean,
Please.
you could. I mean, I don't think you guys would. Just my own judgment review. This is what you're all about. You're about these medical dispensaries. So I don't think you could. But you obviously could elect not to continue availing yourself of your DPH license, and you individually and your sister could form a for-profit corporation that was aimed towards selling recreational marijuana.
But they would have to come back in front of us then.
Excuse
You'd
me.
have to come
You'd have
for
to
a
come back in front of the
Excuse me.
board.
You
have to come back to the
So
board.
you could-
excuse me, before the board goes any further, I'd like town council to make a comment, please.
Really quickly, in reference to your concerns, I don't believe that if there was a grant of a special permit for a dispensary, that is anyway a legal springboard into recreational use, number one. Number two, conditions can be put in which identify it specifically as to a dispensary, and even the negative that no recreational use will be permitted or allowed on the site. And to the extent that you continue as a nonprofit, council's absolutely correct. They can't operate commercially. Of course, obviously, that could change, dynamics could change, but I think there are enough protections, if the board were to grant a special permit, to ensure that it would not be utilized as leverage to go into recreational.
Thank you. That does answer the question. Along the theme of things can change, I think when we were at town meeting, I'm hearing a lot of the, we want it. The town of Southborough voted for this, 66%, we want it. We stood up at the town meeting, we said we wanted it. I think we're now getting a much better understanding of what it is and what it could look like and how it would affect us and affect our society and our community and why we moved to Southborough. And I think those reasons are very important. And I think it would not behoove this organization to try to quickly come to a decision after so many very well thought out reasons, statistics, and feelings have been brought to the table about this. Just because we stood up and said, well, we're going to pass this, that doesn't mean we'll pass anything. And I would leave that final thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comments? Yes, sir?
My name's Eric Simon. I live on 68 Mount Vickery Road. And I don't abut. I don't have any, where I live is not near where the proposed facility would be. But as a segue, a perfect segue for what she just said, I was not there for the town meeting. I'm one of the residents that has never, ever been in this room. And this is the first time I've been here. And there's a reason, and it's because I wanted to understand and hear what was going on in my town. And it's the first time. And it was this particular subject that brought me out here. And as I started to listen to the various people talking, what I heard in the presentations was a lot of risk. I heard about security guards being necessary in a retail establishment. I don't know of any retail establishment in Southborough that has a security guard. CVS supposedly has more potent medicine, or I'm sorry, Walgreens.
Excuse me, sir, what do you mean by security guard?
Oh, security guard at the medical marijuana dispensary.
And you mean other businesses that have it in Southborough?
I do not know of any.
There are other businesses that have it.
Retail businesses?
The main one is EMC.
Is that a retail business?
They have a security thing there.
Is that a
And I
retail
think there's
business?
a couple of others.
It's not retail, is it? I mean, when I walk into a business in Southborough, I've not seen a security guard sitting that's going to card me when I walk in, put me in a vestibule.
Excuse me, sir. Yeah. Go ahead.
So what I've heard from the applicant was that there's a lot of process necessary, which speaks to me as a lot of risk. And if there's a lot of risk, I believe there's inherent danger, or believed to be potential danger. And what it says to me, I mean, Dr. Medina did a great presentation actually presenting facts with statistics and sightings of studies. I've heard anecdotal quotes from the other side about that refute it, but in my mind, unless we actually have real data, I don't think it makes sense to believe anecdotes rather than facts. And that's why I'm against having a medical marijuana dispensary at 225 Turnpike Road.
Okay. Any other public comments? Yes, ma'am.
So I'm Erin Wheatley, 22 Clifford, and now I'm wearing a different hat as well. So I'm not an MD, I'm a PhD scientist. I don't have reefer madness. I didn't get high before I got here. I do have a prescription for Percocet, and I don't go and sell them on the street after I pick them up. I actually use them for pain management. So I was a little bit offended by some of the comments made tonight by the representative from CONCAM. I mean, we are a very close-knit town. We work very hard to build a safe community, especially for our children. I think that's probably the most important thing about Southborough, is how much we care about our kids. And we did put zoning in at 500 feet, and I also was at the meeting, and I remember it very, very well, what happened at the meeting. I remember the scare tactic about if we didn't vote the change in that the government, Massachusetts government was gonna come in and put a medical marijuana dispensary in every single one of our backyards. I mean, I remember that meeting very well. So I'm standing here for my very, very firm belief. I was also an EMT for 6 years. I rode North Colony ambulance, so I have a strong medical background as well as a scientific background. And one area that we haven't discussed very much tonight are edibles. So it was brought up that this dispensary will be selling edibles, and I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with edibles. Do you know what they are? Do you know what forms they're sold as? Gummy bears, Fruit Loops, brownies, lollipops. Did you know that's what edibles look like? In California, medical marijuana has been in place. First of all, many people have licenses to purchase medical marijuana. Whether there's a barcode on a bag of Fruit Loops is not going to preclude those potentially getting into the hands of our children. And that is the biggest concern I have, because I'm really sorry, but whether it's 500 feet or 600 feet or 1,000 feet, you're willing to risk one of your kids being exposed to these drugs in the form of something that they have no idea what it is? A bag of Cheerios, a bag of Fruit Loops. Have you ever seen medical edibles? Because I have. A Fruit Loop that's laced with THC looks exactly like a Fruit Loop. It doesn't have a barcode on it. It doesn't have a little buzzer on it that says that it's a dangerous drug. These drugs are dangerous. Children, they get into the hands of children, and they're going to be dispensed extremely close to 2 of our schools in our town. So everyone's sitting here mulling over, oh, this or that, or we don't understand why you're concerned, and that people are coming out because we have reefer madness is insulting. It's absolutely insulting. And I'm going to challenge each one of you, and I hope that you take the time to really, really think about whether you're going to approve this tonight or really do some research on edibles and the impact they are having on children nowadays. And it's not just high school children. This is elementary school children and middle school children are accessing these drugs. They don't have any understanding of them, and the power of them is much, much greater than anything that's been out there from when we grew up in exposure to marijuana. And so just on that alone, I think that this board should do some serious research and understanding of these guidelines that we put into place, 500 feet, 1,000 feet, they're not meant to be like, oh, 500 feet, and if it's 501, then everybody's safe. That is not true. And I also behoove you to all walk to the site from Clifford, because you can see the site very clearly. It's not a cliff. You could walk up the site. Yes, it is wooded. It has trees. There is dirt. Any kid could climb up the hill there. It's not insurmountable. And I'm asking, has anybody actually come and looked at the location of the site from the Clifford Road?
I have.
And
I've walked it.
You've
both
walked
sides.
up? Okay. And so
I
you
also walked the 4 new houses that were built on Clifford Road. That was a major issue by all the neighbors in that area.
Okay, and what's that mean?
Well, it's just the same thing as basically the neighbors in that area had major complaints on the houses that were being built because the trees were cut down.
I mean, I guess I'm.
It has nothing to do with
Oh, okay.
this.
I was just
It has
wondering, are you
nothing to do
tying
with
that
this.
into the discussion tonight?
It has nothing to do with
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I was confused. So again, I mean, I think no matter what, if you guys are rushing to make a decision, I don't understand why. I think as a concerned citizen and really understanding the potential impact that this could have on the school kids, and there are a lot of kids around there. There's an after-school program. There's kids walking around the streets all the time. There's soccer games constantly going on. It's a very high-traffic, child-dense area. And I really, really am requesting from my heart that you take some time and really understand the edibles and the potential impact that they could have on our community in this close proximity to 2 of our schools. Thank you.
Any further comment?
Mr. Chairman, I've been asked to respond just very briefly, if I may.
The thing is, right now, I'm gonna let that sit, okay, for now. I'm gonna go forward and get the rest of these comments.
Can you just have him respond to the edibles? That's one thing.
Go ahead.
Because
Yeah.
that was
That's all right.
was
if you'd like
incendiary,
that.
so I'd like to hear the response to that.
So absolutely. So there's no commercially available candy packaging. This isn't like Colorado where you can make a fake Hershey's bar and put marijuana in it. This is absolutely the opposite. The packaging that these marijuana infused products have to have is packaging that is opaque. You can't see through it. You also can only have the name of it can say Comcan Inc. on it and their logo, which is not some shiny logo with a dancing bear.
What is the form of the edibles?
The edibles can come in all forms. We'd be happy to not do gummy bears. If, that's not, there's no Fruit Loops, there's no edibles like that. Now, the idea, so one of the things we talked about were the edibles. They also come in capsules, in pills, much like the Percocet that some people take, and that somehow hopefully stays away from children as well. And so these are in packages where we actually do more, like we talked about, than Walgreens does when they dispense your Percocet to you. We're going to get patients to actually sign an acknowledgement form of how they're going to store this stuff, and we're going to make sure that it's stored in a proper way. But edibles come in different formats. Different people have different debilitating conditions that they.
What are the formats that your dispenser's going to have?
So they'll come in different foods. They'll come in capsules. They'll come in pills. They'll come in. Yes, food. I'm sorry. Yes, food. Through the chair. I'm sorry. Yes, definitely food, because different debilitating conditions are treated with different methods. So people with Crohn's disease versus people who can't smoke versus people who need to vaporize versus people who need to take a capsule versus people who use a tincture. There's also balms that people put.
Capsules is the way that could be edibles.
They come in all different forms, and so depending on what you want to have. So there's a whole plant aspect to it too. So like I said, there's different.
It's a fairly simple question. What forms are the edibles? So one is capsules.
Capsules, foods, brownies, absolutely.
Brownies,
Yes,
okay.
they do, but they're going to be sold in such a manner so that they're going to be in packaging that you can't tell what's in it.
I'm not worried about what,
Yeah.
you're tracking of and all that stuff. I'm just wondering are they coming gummy bears or no? Do they come in gummy bears?
So you can't make your edibles look like commercially available candy. We're not going to fake gummy bears. If the gelatin that a gummy bear is made out of is a good mechanism for somebody to ingest different forms of cannabis.
Like vitamin gummy bear type things?
Like a vitamin thing. We're not going to make fake gummy bears so people think, oh, this is not Colorado's recreational marijuana program. There's different formats, different methods of ingestion that different people with different conditions can take. We are not making fake candy with marijuana in it. We're not. That's just not the way it's going to be. And that's just a miss. I'm sorry.
It can't be by the regulation.
Yeah, and you certainly can't have it packaged so it looks like any commercially available thing. We're not making fake candy. That's not the point of this. It's a purely medical program, and I absolutely understand why people think that's the way it is, because that's what you see on TV, that's what you hear, that's what you see out of Colorado, that's what you see out of non-medical recreational states. Massachusetts is just an absolutely different program, and that's not the way we're going to be dispensing or creating cannabis. And I've said it right here in a public forum in front of the Special Permit Granting Authority, and so that's something that we're going to have to stick to. So I hope that helps. I get it. I have 2 young children also. I get the understanding. It's just a matter. I feel like I'm a teacher, honestly. I go around and we try to educate people about this is a patient-focused program. And so the more education people have, the less I think maybe Reefer Madness was taken wrong. It's just that sort of hysteria that people get around the medical use of marijuana program, as I was referring to. I wasn't trying to say that the people who live in Southborough were coming to this meeting stoned. That was not what I was getting at all.
And when we talked about divergence, I mean, I guess if it comes in the form of a gummy bear, then it's more likely for a child inside of a household to be attracted to their parents or their siblings' medical marijuana than if it's just in a capsule. If it's a brownie, it's going to be an attractive nuisance to another child in the household, right?
You know, eating it is definitely a preferred method of ingestion for a lot of medical marijuana patients. You know, the edibles, so it's been going up and up and up. It's well over 30% now nationwide is the sales of infused products. You know, so edibles is one portion of that. So, but eating it is absolutely a good method of ingestion. A lot of people don't want to smoke it. A lot of people don't want to vaporize it. Getting it in a capsule is not the same thing that you're extracting and turning into an oil. When you make you use whole plant to make lots of foods. You actually cook it into like a butter. There's a commercial kitchen in these places, the way they do it. So it's, you know, telling some patients that the way they prefer to ingest it is not valid, and other patients it is valid. But we're not making anything that's going to look like a commercially reasonable candy. They're not going to be little gummy bears. There will not be. There might be something made out of that same gelatin or whatever, you know, substance, but we're not making little gummy bears with marijuana in them. That's not going to happen.
Okay. Excuse me, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, my name's Ed Park. I live at 24 Darlene. My property is nowhere near the proposed dispensary. So this is also my first time ever to a town meeting, ever. And so I guess I'm somewhat ignorant some of these things. But it appears to me that you have the board has a tremendous amount of discretion in this. You have a lot. The bylaws have afforded you a lot of judgment, which is a good thing, because we're all people. We all have feelings. We all have the way we ascertain risk, the way we ascertain benefit, and so there's a lot of things. I'm happy that you are looking at a lot of these issues besides just reading the rules, you know, and saying, oh, 500 feet, okay, let's do it, you know. So that's just one thing. I just want to impress to you that you have a lot of discretion, it appears to me. First thing, I just want to reiterate for like the third time, I'm looking at this and I see safety. I mean, the gentleman here sitting at the table said it themselves. You need a guard there. You need, you know, levels of entry. Every single car that delivers needs 2 agents and a lockbox. I mean, they're saying it themselves. This is a risky business. The gentleman over there in law enforcement, he's confirming it as well. This is a genuine safety risk. They're saying it themselves here at this table. They need high security because it's only been a few months since this has happened here in Massachusetts, but some creative person will find a way to rob them. I would if I were a criminal. I'd find a way. They have to randomize their pickups so they don't get robbed. They have to randomize their pickups. These are all the precautions they have to take because this is a high-risk enterprise, extremely high risk. So that's one thing. Just take into account the safety. And the gentleman over there, the physician who mentioned about where cars might turn off, I mean, that just blew my mind. I was like, oh, my word. If they have to turn off and go into a street with some kids and they're impaired, I mean, this is the discretion you have, right? So that's one thing. Another thing is I work in the pharmaceutical industry. I've worked in it for 12 years. I've talked with the FDA numerous times. I've been through review processes for pharmaceuticals. Okay, and I know the gentleman here at the table, they mentioned certain traceability, you know, mechanisms that they're using under state law and things like that. But I've been through the FDA regulatory process, and I'm telling you, because we were able to pass a law that allows medical marijuana by the people, they were able to skirt completely around the FDA, and they're just able to open this stuff up. I mean, the FDA review process, biocompatibility, controlled, prospective, randomized, blinded, double-blinded clinical studies. We're talking about review of every single raw material that goes into your product, including the water that we even use to manufacture our products. These are highly, highly regulated. This does not come close. Now, I know you're probably saying, what does the FDA have to do with this? Once again, you have a lot of discretion. Think about what you're allowing to be here, okay? You're allowing to be here a product where you have to prove to the FDA without a reasonable doubt, and sometimes they even get it wrong at the FDA, right? You have to prove to them that the benefits of your product outweigh the safety risks, the serious adverse events that could take place. Now, I went to the FDA website today just to do a quick check, and I saw the FDA has never approved a marijuana product. They've only approved like 1 or 2 synthetics that are probably made in a factory, right? From petroleum products, but not marijuana. They have never reviewed, no one has ever applied for an approval at the FDA for a marijuana product. Do you know why? Probably because they know if they went up to them right to the FDA and asked and submitted an NDA, a new drug application, the FDA reviewers will look at it and go, oh my word, you gotta be kidding me. We cannot justify this based upon law.
Isn't it because it's illegal on the federal level, though?
Serious adverse effects could, what's that?
You can't submit an illegal, you can't, it's illegal on the federal level, isn't that why there's no?
No,
FDA
actually,
approach?
the FDA invites it. They invite it, but they haven't seen anything yet.
That's nothing.
And it's probably because a lot of the marijuana, dispensaries are saying, dude, why even bother? We skirt around the FDA anyway, and we can get this stuff right here in these dispensaries by walking right in and asking the city. Now, okay, so let me just put the FDA thing aside here, okay, just for a sec. All right, because let's just say there may be people on an anecdotal basis, and I do believe this, that could benefit from medical marijuana, okay? They're out there. They're probably a very rare population. Okay, so let's talk access. I mean, they said it themselves at this table. They can have it delivered. I mean, come on, that's an open door. Let's walk right through it, people. They can drive it right up to a person's door and hand it. Their facility, I believe, is going to be in Medway, where they manufacture this, where they grow it or whatever, and they cultivate it. That's 10 minutes down the road on 495. They can get here. And plus, trust me, they will find a way to get here if they're customers. They will find a way. They may be a nonprofit, but I'm sure that nonprofit could find a great way to pay their CEO and founder very well if they're making a good amount of money, and that counts against their expenses, not against a profit. So just think about that. They'll find a way. And I don't begrudge you that. If I were you, I'd find a way too. I'd find a way too. If they're customers, you'll find a way. They'll get here. Don't worry about that. The patients here who want to try it, even though it's not FDA approved and have never been reviewed by the FDA, if they want to try it, they have access. They have access. Okay? So the final thing is, look, I mean, and I wish I could be as more eloquent than the other people who came up here earlier, but I mean, this is a business. I don't buy into the logic that this is a health program. The reason why Framingham, I guess somebody had said here earlier, had 180 applications is because you could make a junk load of money on this. Okay, this is a business. Nonprofit, whatever you want to call it, they could pay the employees tons of money and they all make a good cut. So just think about it that way too. And think about all the other businesses in this town. They themselves said, the vast majority of the buildings and business owners, office buildings, they don't want to have anything to do with them. Do you know why? Because it's bad business for those guys. They're smart. Let's be smart. Bad business for Southborough. So that's all I got to say there. Think about safety, think about the FDA, think about access, think about this as a business. I'm not sure we want it here. All right, thank you.
All right, I have no further comments from the public for a while. I want to talk to the board. I want the board, which have heard the comments and all the different things made, I'd like to have a general idea of what the board is feeling about this permit. So we can decide which way we're going to go forward here. So I think it's something that we need. I mean, we're having just a general conversation and the same conversation going over and over again. One thing that, so I'd like to have the board, so we'll start with Paul, what your feeling is on this application.
As far as what is
Approval or disapproval? Do you feel we should vote on it tonight, or have you had enough questions and answers, or what is your
I
feeling?
mean, I think we've had a lot of questions, we've had a lot of answers. I guess originally you asked if we needed to continue based on the presentation that was made, and which I did not feel we needed to. But when asked of the applicant, I guess there was some, that they did appear to want to answer some of the questions asked. So based on that, I think it would probably be best to continue at this point to allow them to further answer the questions from that study if they so choose. I mean, no one can force them to answer something, but if that seems to make sense, you know, I think, you know, I think we should hear that then.
Okay. And
Well, I'm actually going to change my mind a
you
little
need
bit.
to use the mic, sir, so I can.
I have it on. It's right here.
Yeah, we'll get it so we.
All right. I do think that it's an issue that's obviously, taken very seriously by a lot of residents here, and we owe it the due diligence to continue and think about it and give the applicant the opportunity to address some of the issues raised in the material that was distributed by the doctor.
Andrew?
I do not agree that we should continue the hearing. I heard many of the residents say that we should carefully consider this and we should not rush this, and I understand that. But my concern is that if we continue this, the next hearing is really gonna be a repeat of the same arguments. And one thing that I feel strongly about is that even though I personally voted against the medical marijuana referendum, whenever it was, 3 or 4 years ago, the law has been passed. And so there's two parts of this. There's the special permit criteria, the distance from the school, and there's nothing here that really runs afoul of that. The general special permit criteria about whether it's in conflict with public health, safety, etc. My concern is that you can't deny the special permit on the grounds that because it's a medical marijuana facility, that the nature of medical marijuana is itself in conflict with the public health and safety, because the town has already passed a bylaw that permits medical marijuana use somewhere. So it really has to do with the location. It's restricted to Route 9, it's on Route 9, so then it becomes where on Route 9 it would be. And I don't see that you would be any better or worse at this location than any other location on Route 9.
Well,
So those are my general feelings.
there is one thing that you need to know, that these houses are basically the father's houses away from these areas that are available in town on Route 9. A lot of houses are a lot
And
closer.
a lot of the most controversial things that have come before the board recently, they have to do with these commercial uses on Route 9 and people who live very close to Route 9. There's nothing we can do it's gonna constantly keep coming up. So, but the bylaw, I think we have to apply the bylaw. The bylaw says you can have a medical marijuana facility, dispensary, on Route 9. So it's just about where on Route 9. And I don't see anything that's presented that gives us a reason to deny it. Even though I might have completely different opinions about medical marijuana, whether it's a good thing or whether it's a bad thing. I just don't think we should continue the hearing to get into medical studies and criminal data, because I'm not competent to know what's right, what's wrong.
Tom?
For me, I mean, I share a lot of your same thoughts on this. What turned my view during this hearing with the doctor's presentation, and you probably heard from my comments earlier, this concept of diversion has raised my antenna. And so he's raised some data that I found interesting and a little bit alarming. So for me personally, that is something that I'd like to explore further, because I think this does play into the general concept. And I agree with you. I don't think we can find that this use is a threat to public safety, because it is something that we've already approved as a use that's permitted in the town. But when it comes to the standard of detrimental or offensive to the neighborhood, this particular site does have the characteristic of being a lot closer to the schools, even though it's beyond 500 feet than other neighborhoods are. So for me, I'm interested in learning more about this concept of diversion, and that they raise this issue about the forms of edible marijuana. I was alarmed by it being in the form of gummy. I know they're saying they're not gummy bears, but they're in other attractive forms like brownies and gummy type vitamin types of things. That raises my antenna more as a father of 4 young children about diversion and access to kids if they're brought home and what form they're in. So that's one subject that I would be in favor of continuing the hearing to explore further.
I agree with what Andrew is saying, and a major concern that I have, listening to the abutters and everything, is people that are gonna come into this store and buy marijuana I can't see why they're gonna go to the school and try to get rid of it. But people that live in the neighborhood that have marijuana because they're sick, probably gonna end up letting it get to kids. But because there's a store in town that does it, I just feel that it's very, it's just fun. And the agreement on this issue here that you said, Tom, is if you've read, which I've done a lot of studying on this, is that it is a health issue. And I have personally talked to doctors about it. And it is a health issue, and the state regulation that was approved was done very strongly, which I think you know more about it than I do, but was done very strongly to represent the way it would be done, and that's why it took as long as it did to get it approved by the state, So I think that technically that I agree with you as far as the approval of the project under what we do, and I think that your issue, Tom, is something that legally is going to be taken over by the state and by the Board of Health and controlled, which they've already approved it and done it all. So they're gonna, they would be appealing it. Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. I mean, I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there, whether there's conditions you can put on the form of edibles in a special permit. I don't know, because it's probably already so heavily regulated by DPH and things like that, but I think that one possible condition that we've talked about, there's an excellent idea someone brought up, is to say, okay, but this will never be used for recreational.
I agree 100%.
Completely limited to its current non-profit form, and that would address the concern that if there's a ballot referendum that legalizes recreational marijuana in Massachusetts in 4, 5, 2 years, that this protects that.
No, I agree, that would be
That doesn't go to my issue of diversion.
I understand it doesn't, but that's why I was just throwing it out there, and
Yeah.
maybe I shouldn't have thrown it out there, because it probably conflicts with other.
I mean, it's something that I would definitely, would go into as something in a consideration of a decision, there's no question about that.
Lee, I have a question. Maybe this is naive, but one of their concerns was raised about people going through the neighborhood. Is there a possibility to have a condition on traffic conditions to somehow dissuade people, patients from going down Deerfoot to exit? I mean, Route 9 has a turnaround about a quarter mile down the road or less from there. I don't know if that's something that's historically been done, or if that would be under the jurisdiction of the planning board.
In general,
How could you do something?
That's why I'm just raising it as a
the
question.
thing is, in general, unless it's people that live in the north end of the town of Southborough, anybody else is gonna go out to Route 9 and go north to 495, or go south, or go north 495 to the Mass Turnpike to go east or west, so the likelihood of the traffic going on those back roads, maybe a little bit, but I don't think it'd be, unless there's somebody that lives in the area, that it would be a major issue at all. I really don't.
I'm just, raising that
Because
historically.
Route 9
is
has
something
that
we've done?
turnaround, it's right there.
Correct, it does. It's right down the road.
I don't know how we could
It would be,
adopt a
there would be
condition that
nothing
could
you could
actually
do
be
to enforce it,
implementable.
really.
There'd be no way to.
Well, something that I think we could do is that we could make a recommendation or a condition that the owner
That they just post something
take
asking
a
them not to do
poster
it.
showing the way people and the way he advertises the condition of the location of your property, that it's on Route 9, westbound, and that, you go a quarter mile down, you take a left-hand turn to get on Route 9 to go eastbound, or you go another quarter of a mile and you get on 495 to go north or south to the Mass, whatever. And I think that's a condition that we could make, that they do as an advertisement of their location, because, am I wrong, correct me, if you're going to do this, you're definitely gonna advertise in the state of Massachusetts your location, because there's nothing in the general area right now. Is that correct?
I can list it with DPH. There's no advertising in the program, so there's no, there's no commercials.
Yeah,
there's
there's,
no-
you don't really see a lot of commercials or billboards for dispensaries. Facebook and LinkedIn have kicked off, or Facebook has kicked out things with marijuana because of the federal
Right.
enforcement. So patients will find us because they're going to know, they're going to be looking for us.
Yeah, but how are they gonna do that?
So the Department of Public Health will list them. There are other social networking tools that we can use. We are going to try to get the word out and let patients find out that we exist. So there's no way that we're going to try to hide the fact, but
And would you do it under the conditions which we make?
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely, and
Absolutely.
And to your point, if there's, again, it's hypothesizing, but if a Southborough police officer pulls someone over in one of these neighborhoods and it's determined that they were cutting through and causing a problem, we don't have to serve that patient anymore. They will never come back to our dispensary.
And moreover, you remember I talked about that form that we'd have patients sign?
My thought was more, you were talking about materials you're gonna have the
We can have-
patient sign
Yes.
and read, that, maybe that's part of the statement.
Absolutely, Mr. Williams. We will have our patients acknowledge that they have to come and go in a specific way, that whatever the board thinks is appropriate. May I read one sentence from the regulations that I think will really help some of this discussion? It's just one sentence. Edible MIPS shall not bear a reasonable resemblance to any product available for consumption as a commercially available candy, period. There's no two ways about that. So that ends, we can't do that. The department, you violate that, they yank your registration.
So you would have no problem with, if the board did grant a special permit, restating that as a condition?
Absolutely not. It's 105 CMR 725 110E1.
Brownies and cookies.
What's
Are
that?
brownies and cookies considered candy?
They're not considered candy, but, well, I've never heard of marijuana in a popcorn. I guess that's possible. But it's just really tough to tell a patient who they want to eat the food as the way they consume marijuana.
Wants cannabis for medical relief.
Excuse me. I'm gonna make a comment on that food part, due to the fact of talking to some different people, that as far as the brownie goes, that is something that people that are old, as Desiree's grandfather was 80, and people that are 90 years old, they have a hard time using some of this other stuff as you would make as a drug to take, or what do you call? But if it is and I've seen this online before, that if it is as a brownie, and a lot of doctors would send their clients to do that because they could internally take it in as, as far as lollipops and stuff, I could agree with you say on that, but as far as there are certain things that
the
are
medium that helps them-
recommended
helps them
by
eat.
the health department to do versus out west, they do it because of the recreational, but this is not recreational. But there are some things, so like Mr. Cipriano says, we can make the decision on that, and like you mentioned that you can't do it, except for what is legally allowed under the bylaw, by the state, because there is allowed under the bylaw, and if I'm
So we're
wrong,
gonna create a
correct.
condition that they can't violate the DPH laws?
Of course, we would certainly agree to that.
Stringent.
Well, I mean, we could restate that language about no commercially available candy right in the special permit conditions as well. I know that was a concern of yours. You had mentioned the
Yeah.
gummy bears and having, that out there, and it's very direct.
Yeah, the language is pretty clear, isn't it, in the Massachusetts bylaws?
Yes, I just
It
read,
seems like it's
I
very
read
thorough.
that directly from 105 CMR 725 110.
So us putting a
E1.
condition to that effect doesn't really do anything, because there are.
105.
Well,
limitation.
we just generally over,
Would reinforce it.
But
Well, you can
to
always
be
add
fair,
whatever you
if
wanna
that
add.
ever
I mean,
changed, we'd
if it's
we'd
redundant,
still be
it's fine.
subject to it.
That's a good point, yeah, if it
It's
ever
not likely to
changed.
change, but
That part probably won't change, I don't see it, but we would continue to be subject to it, and I hope that, at least to some extent, eases the concern of us having, fit candy with marijuana in it, around the houses, and strictly, we can't do it.
so, yeah, I think we're in the process of going forward, except for, I don't know where you're at, Tom.
I'm not sure either.
I mean, I personally feel that we can take and close the public hearing. I think with the conditions that we've discussed, the major conditions, I don't know if there's any others, but I think they are definitely, the one for recreational is an extremely good thing to do. And as far as the, making it for the, issues that Tom brought up, as far as, lollipops or whatever you're gonna do, that would be something that we could also make a condition on. And the other thing is, as far as the parking and all that, that will be going in front of the planning board for approval. And that and the signage and everything would be done and controlled at that stage. Which is something we don't normally do on a project particular like this, so that's their responsibility. So then they will go into that different things like, they may even recommend to put some kind of, barriers in the back and, whatever, just to make it proper, but that would be they would do that. So under the decision that we make, that the conditions of the planning board will be mandatory. Whatever they make is done through them, and that's, is accepted.
I just have a procedural question.
Yes.
So if we're now, you suggested we should close the public hearing, but it sounds like we're still kind of debating or talking about ideas for conditions. So if we close the public hearing and then we have a separate meeting to talk about conditions, then we can't talk to people about it, and it becomes really difficult. And we've
Well,
had
the thing
that
is,
happen in the past, so I don't know what's the right thing to do.
The thing is, if we're going to do it, we're gonna make a motion to close the public hearing. Before that, there'd be no other comments made, which we cannot comment to the public, nor the public can comment to us after we close the public hearing.
Is the applicant.
No.
So we
It's-
can't
no.
ask questions, we can't propose a condition
The
and
only
ask the
thing
applicant whether they'd
that
agree to
would
it.
be done, and I'll have Mr. Cipriano correct me, is we make the conditions, and Joe, which is the new condition writer for us on the board, will do that, and then the recommendation that I will make, that it will go to Mr. Cipriano to be reviewed, and and then it gets filed,
All
like we
right.
normally do.
The first thing you have to decide is you still have, regardless of the hour, you still have people
Right,
that
we got
want
a
to
couple
speak.
more comments, that's
Number
why I'm
one.
trying to decide whether we're gonna
All
go
right, well,
forward or not.
Item one is to afford the people the opportunity to
Yes.
conclude their comments.
Definitely.
Then you have to get a consensus of the board. Does it want to continue this tonight for further input with directions to the applicant to address certain points, or make the decision tonight? If you conclude to close your public hearing, now you're in deliberative session, and you can take no further input from the public at large or the applicant. The only thing that you can get is legal advice on specific fine points. So you gotta make sure, after you get these final comments, what does the board wanna do? Wait, get more information in a second hearing, or end it tonight and go into deliberative session?
So, I agree as far as, giving the residents the time to make their comments. I just thought that, to try to get the board to agree to either do it or not, so, sir, I'll let you go forward, and
Sure. Paul Murphy from 22 Clifford Street. I can see this got sidetracked a little bit. A lot of people talking about the benefits of it. A lot of people talking about, gummy bears and candy and all that. But I think the real issue with the candy and that had to do with the medical marijuana being used by people who give it to someone else, right? And that can have a detrimental effect on the community, right? So that's just one issue. Another good point somebody brought up was the exact zoning law, where it says you have to be 500 feet away from a school. Basically, that law was put in place because there's safety, right, with being closer than 500 feet to the school. So when you have numerous kids in this neighborhood that are within 500 feet.
excuse me, so you need to use that mic.
Sure. There's numerous kids in the neighborhood that are within 500 feet. So that, since it's safe, it's a safety issue being that close to the school, it must be a safety issue when those kids are that close to that premise. So I don't know how you could differentiate behind that. The study that got brought up cites that, medical marijuana is getting diverted When that gets diverted, that's going to have an impact on the neighborhood. Crime got brought up. Crime at this site, that's an imminent safety risk, right? We had a site from the doctor about a study that was done saying that crime had increased at medical marijuana facilities. We also had someone from Homeland Security come in and say, yes, you know, it's a much higher risk. That's imminent danger to the neighborhood. No matter how you look at it, you have to look at those aspects of it. And that's where we're not complying with the zoning. That's where there's a conflict. You know, we can talk about all those other things, whether it's good, whether it's not. I want to look at these studies that got cited clearly have identified issues with having a medical marijuana facility there. The board is listening to this and saying, oh, well, we don't know, we can't read all these studies. Not one study was brought up by the ComCan, and they did reference that property values increased around medical marijuana facilities, and I would love to see that study. So why don't you ask him to provide you with that study, since that would show that there is no negative impact. So I think that's it. I think you really need to look at the zoning bylaw and how this is impeding that zoning, or in conflict with that zoning bylaw.
Say that again?
You have to really look at the zoning bylaw and look and see how this doesn't comply, contradicts with that bylaw. Because it does. There's safety issues, there's known safety issues, and that's the bottom line. It's not about whether medical marijuana, whether we're voting for it, whether we're not. It's about that will impact the neighborhood. Housing values will go down, crime will go up. There's hard facts that show that. And I would expect the board to do their due diligence and research that and understand it before coming to a decision.
The thing is that technically is not a legal issue. I mean, this came up at town meeting, and that the regulations, with discussion at the selectman's office with the police chief that was there, of, you know, the maintenance and the way they do things and the offices they have. Under the state regulations, it's not there. It's not an issue. And it's not an issue in what we, excuse me, you have to speak at the speaker. You wait. It's not a legal issue to do with zoning in this town or any town.
No,
it's the same thing in every town that it's been in, that it's been approved by. Every town.
Can you explain yourself on that?
Say it again?
Can you explain yourself to me? Because I'm not fully understanding. So you're saying that the bylaw...
I'm saying that what the doctor wrote in his, and stuff.
Okay, it's not what the doctor wrote. These are studies that were cited,
under
right?
the
National
regulations
studies.
of the Massachusetts Health Center and everything, all these different things have been looked at when the state approved this bylaw. And that discussion of you know, breaking in and entries and robberies and all this other stuff was discussed and everything. But it was decided the way it'd be maintained and done.
But how can the state know exactly every single location and say, yeah, that doesn't impact it? That's why that bylaw is in there. That bylaw is in there because they're saying, hey, make sure that this will not impact your neighborhood, that it won't create, there's no safety issues from it. It's the same thing with the restaurant, right? How will that impact the neighborhood? So you're in a very, you know, suburban neighborhood and it's zoned for a restaurant, and you get somebody who wants to open up a strip joint, right? Well, that's a different scenario.
It's the same thing as looking at it that way, and what you're saying, then it can't be built in the town of Southborough anywhere because the residents are closer than this location. Anywhere in the town of Southborough.
I disagree with that. I disagree with that because it could go into a shopping mall somewhere.
There
right?
is no location.
No, there are locations that are not available right now. So maybe they'll become available.
Locations available.
So you're
under
saying
the 500-foot buffer zone.
So not down near where Genzyme is, down that end by Owen O'Leary's on that side,
No.
down Route 9?
The artistic school is across the street. You can't build anywhere down there. And the village business district in Fayetteville is not allowed to have it built in that district either. or in Cottleville. That's something in the zoning bylaw. It's not allowed to be built in those districts. Fayetteville has the artistic school, which is all the way up to Oak Hill Road almost now. So that 500 feet is the other side of Woodland Road, which is the end of Bill, so nothing can be built down that way.
So what you're saying is you don't need to consider any safety issues with putting that medical marijuana in because they've already been considered?
Safety issues have been controlled under the rules and regulation of the state.
So is that correct from the town lawyer? So is that correct from the town lawyer?
No. The board, Andrew, make a comment on that?
I'm not the town's lawyer. I'm just a member of the board. And as I said before, I personally voted against the medical.
So here's the deal. I don't really care how you voted. That's not the issue. The issue is it going to impact the safety and health of our community in that area? That's it, period. There's nothing else. That's what we're looking at. We can talk about, do we legalize marijuana? Do we do any of this? We're talking about, is there an impact? And there clearly is an impact from it, and we've cited a lot of case studies on it. All I'm doing is saying, I want you guys to sit back and read those studies to actually understand, before you vote on something like this, the impact that it will have on the community.
That's why you represent us.
You've done this in many, many towns.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
And there's nothing different in this town than any other towns on the health and safety regulations, are there?
Well, I think the statement that it's not going to affect the health of the communities is wrong, because it's going to benefit the health of the community. It's a medical program, and it's for sick people. It's not for anyone else. No one is really going to know that the thing is there. It's going to help the community. As far as the security and the safety issue, we're sort of in a bad shape if we do, and a bad shape if we don't, right? If we didn't propose any security, then they would say, oh, there's not enough security. The fact is, all the security we're proposing is mandated by the state regulations. I'm not saying we need a security guard there any more than your local Walgreens needs a security guard to protect the 80 milligram Oxycontins that are filling the back. What I am saying is that the state regulations have been fashioned in such a way as to calm the fears of the people in the Commonwealth, and we're going to comply with them. So as far as health and safety, I think that it probably would benefit the community as opposed to hurt it.
So he's strictly... He's strictly talking
Does the
about...
applicant have studies you could cite that would support the argument?
So,
I know that was brought up earlier. I just trying to get away from the passion.
So,
Are there studies that would help here if we continued?
Wayne State University School of Medicine in 2013. Medical marijuana is associated with a decline in the use of prescription drugs, including opiates. That's Wayne State University. It's not normal. It's not Americans for Safe Access. Then again, I already cited the American Medical Association, 24.8% lower mean annual opioid overdose mortality rate. Another one, this is Anderson D. Mark, Medical Marijuana Laws and Teen Marijuana Use, University of Colorado and the Institute for Study of Labor, 2012. Results were not consistent with the hypothesis that the legalization of medical marijuana caused an increase in the use of marijuana and other substances among high school students. I got another one. This is Haseen Deborah S. et al. Medical Marijuana Laws and Adolescent Marijuana Use in the USA from 1991 to 2014. Results from annual repeated cross-sectional surveys. The Lancet Psychiatry. The results of studies suggest that passage of state medical marijuana laws do not increase adolescent use of marijuana. On top of all that, we have the, and I actually have the study here, the National Transportation Safety Board has concluded that, in fact, a new study, this is 2015, not 2012 or older, a new study from the NTSB finds that drivers who use marijuana are at a significantly lower risk for a crash than drivers who use alcohol. Okay, that's the first half, and you say, well, it's still higher than regular drivers, right? Oh. And after adjusting for age, gender, race, and alcohol use, drivers who tested positive for marijuana were no more likely to crash than who had not used any drugs or alcohol prior to driving. This is the end. Sorry.
I think he's making the point.
Excuse me, sir, he's talking.
Oh, I thought he was done. I'm sorry.
So The police chief in Los Angeles has said that banks are more likely to get robbed than medical marijuana dispensaries. That's Los Angeles. That's California, a virtually unregulated program. That's Charlie Beck, the police chief of Los Angeles, has said that. They're,
All right, this is in public.
that's
Speak out time. Perfect.
Yeah. I've made it very clear in town council, you can only speak at the microphone. So if you want to get up and speak, I'm back to where I was a few minutes ago with this board. Is the board in consideration of closing this hearing and voting or continuing it? Because it's 11:15, and I mean, I think, you know, my personal opinion is I agree that we close the public hearing and vote on it.
We want to see more evidence. The applicant said that.
Excuse me, no, you can't. We're discussing it.
You said you're going to close, so
We're discussing it, sir, and you can't presently.
So can you close it?
And I don't want to be impolite to the residents. I don't like being that way, but I have no choice. I had to make the board to make a decision. If the board agrees that they're going to continue it, then the next meeting, you can bring all the questions up and answers you want. If the board doesn't want to, they have the right to close the public hearing and vote on it. It's your decision to make. Do it one way or the other, because it's 11:15 and that's it. But yes, sir, I'll let you.
I just have a question. So can you close on it before you hear everybody's arguments or the townspeople's
that
arguments?
again?
Can you
Here's one
close
thought.
it
Can I
before
throw
you
this
hear
out to you guys?
everybody's arguments?
Because one, I think there's more, there's a line of people who still want to talk. There's still people who want to give input. And then secondly, we brought up this issue of conditions. If we're going to consider granting this, which I feel that's where things are going, I'm not sure where I stand, but I feel that's where, I wouldn't mind getting more public input into, if we do grant it, what kind of conditions would they think would be appropriate? And I think it might be worth another session to explore that.
I agree with you, because as much as I said earlier, I thought he would be kind of in favor of closing the public hearing. Once we get into discussing conditions, if we close before we consider the conditions, then we can't even ask the applicant what they think of the conditions, and that's very awkward, so.
And from my perspective, if the residents, you know, are faced with the possibility of this being granted, I'd like to give them an opportunity to give us what types of conditions they would want to see put in here.
I don't object to that.
What's that?
I agree with that.
I think concept is to continue the hearing,
All right.
basically to allow more public input and then public
All
input
right,
into.
let's make a motion. if
I
that-
would like to say, though, that I don't think we need to hear the same arguments over and over again,
No,
though.
Agreed.
we're
I mean,
not going to hear the
this
same
not,
argument.
not just this particular issue, but other issues that we've had. If you can't keep saying the same thing over and over again. If there's other things to add that are
You're right.
pertinent, that's
Yeah.
fine,
Well,
but
I think stuff that's
we can
relevant.
close it without hearing everyone.
Yeah.
So we don't want to have just everyone keep coming up because they're irate and want to say the same thing for the next, 2-3 hours or 2-3 hours.
No,
at
I think it
another
has to be
meeting.
relevant to the bylaws.
Right, agreed.
All right, I make a motion that we continue the hearing until next month.
April 6th.
Will that be a date that we have just for this?
Yes, it'll
Okay.
just be for this, nothing else.
I wouldn't be available
But
on
I would
April
not be.
6th.
Excuse me, what?
I won't be available on April 6th.
When they,
I'm gonna be away, so
be
the week,
available April 6th
the week after that, I would be available.
I'm not available April 6th either.
the week after that, we can't do. They do it the week before. March 30th, next week.
I won't be available.
What?
I won't be available that week.
Well, we have to get it done before.
Yeah, I understand. I'm gonna be traveling. I won't be available on those 2 dates.
Do we have to do it on a Wednesday? Can we do it on the 7th?
No, we can do it, say that again, on the 7th?
April 7th?
Yeah, we could do it then.
Can I just say I won't be back until, can I just say I won't be back until April 8th, a Friday? So I'm sorry, but that whole week is not good for me.
How about the Tuesday, the 5th? Are you out then too?
When are you going away?
Monday.
That whole week?
Yeah, I'm going to be away for 2 weeks, starting Monday. So that's why next week and the
Sorry,
week after are
next-
not
so the
good.
week of the 11th?
The week of the 11th would be fine. after that, I shouldn't have any conflicts.
Do it tomorrow night.
We could tell me.
Do it tomorrow night.
Continue it to tomorrow. What? Tomorrow night? Continue it to tomorrow. We have a meeting tomorrow night. Can we continue it tomorrow night?
How would the board consider continue it until tomorrow night?
Do we have a relatively full docket tomorrow night?
We have it documented.
Oh, do we? Is
Our
there?
agenda's up until 8:30. It would be after, it'd be after 9, it'd be 9:30, the earliest that we could do it. And we do have, you have two things in between, and then we have Park Central at 8:30.
Is there gonna be a lot of stuff on the Park Central?
There could be, depending where it's gonna be at.
I don't even know if we have the applicants available.
We could make ourselves available tomorrow night. In my preparation, I was wondering, just so I know what to expect, if it happens tomorrow night or the next meeting, would we be limiting the public inquiry to conditions of the special permit? So is that? No. Okay.
The thing is, what I would recommend, if the board would agree to it tomorrow night, that we do the hearing at 6:30 tomorrow night, because our first meeting is until 7:30. So we have an hour and a half of discussion
I'm okay with that.
for our meeting.
I,
Is the board members available to do that?
I would be available at 6:30, yes.
Andrew?
Good, okay.
Yes.
Does it have to get posted 24 hours before?
We're continuing it, right, for tomorrow night at 6:30.
That doesn't really give the residents time to put together the conditions, and if that's what you're talking about, then we need to have time to get together and discuss that.
What do you mean the conditions?
You said that you were going to put together conditions on this?
We're putting together the conditions, ma'am.
Right,
not the
but
residents.
I thought part of this was that we were going to be able to put our input.
Right. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, we would let you guys do it tonight if we had more time.
Right,
we're
but that
still
doesn't really
continuing.
give us any time either.
It gives you
But
a
if we
day
closed it now and
to
voted, you wouldn't have
think
had
about
time
what you
anyways.
might want.
We could close the meeting now and vote on things.
I think the
So
intent.
we're allowing another day to discuss things.
Isn't
that-
the
Okay,
intent
and we're
to-
just asking as residents, because this is an extremely important issue to us, that we have a little bit more time. That's all I'm asking. You're representing us, and we're asking you to give us more time to put together. We didn't even know that that was an option. So we're going to have to convene and get together. We all work full-time.
We do too.
I know, I have full respect for
We were
you.
here tonight for this.
Right, I totally understand
We're
that.
trying to get a day. That's the only day
If
we're
I could say, I think the intent is to have the public meeting continue so that we can have that discussion of.
So we should come
Okay.
for-
Conditions
Excuse me,
with the public.
Ma'am, I'm going to make a motion that we continue the meeting until 6:30 tomorrow night and discuss it. 6 o'clock tomorrow night, discuss it. And if there's a major issue with the residents, maybe we'll continue it again. But we'll go forward with that if the board agrees to it.
At
6 or 6:30?
6, so we give it an hour and a half. And if we have a little recess in between, that'll be
6
all right.
might be difficult for our,
Oh, Tom says he'd be all right.
I thought 6:30, that 6 is harder, but if we absolutely have to do it, but 6:30 would be better for me.
All right, you want to do 6:30?
6:30.
Yeah.
All right, so we make a motion that we can continue the hearing until 6:30 tomorrow night. And do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion amongst the board? You're available?
I'll make myself available, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
Town council, are you available? Is the building inspector available? Okay, all in favor, remember by saying aye?
Aye.
Very good. I thank you very much. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Discussion? All
None
in favor?
whatsoever.
Aye.
That's probably one of the craziest meetings I've ever.